Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township, March 5th, 2019. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, if Pastor Scott Isham could come up with Shelton Park Church of God to open us up in prayer. Let's make sure the green light's on that.
Yep, that's all. Our Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this evening. We're thankful for our community, thankful for our township. God, we thank you for our leaders. We thank you for their work and their endeavorment. God, we thank you for each and every one that has come here this evening. Lord, we work together for the betterment of our community. We ask your blessing, we ask your strength, we ask your wisdom, and we ask your grace, and we give you the glory for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, item 3 is the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to number 2, approval of the agenda. Starting off right there.
Approval of the agenda is submitted.
Support. Okay, motion is supporter. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Proney?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 3, the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to A, approve and place on file the minutes of the February 19, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, appointment of Tom Zdybek as the Planning Commission representative to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Look for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Motion is supported by Mr. Montre. Discussion? Mr. Montre, sorry about that.
Thanks, sir.
Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Proney?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 4, presentations. Update on the vapor intrusion in downtown Temperance area. Sheryl Doxtader, Michigan DEQ, and Christopher Westover, Monroe County Environmental Health. If you guys would like to come on up. Give us a little background, a little history of what's going on. And
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having myself and Sheryl. I'm Chris Westover. As the supervisor said, I'm from the Monroe County Health Department, and Sheryl's here from the Jackson office of Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. We're just here to briefly update the board and those in the room on something that came to our attention in late 2018. Sheryl had contacted me in, I guess it was November, Sheryl, about a potential environmental issue that arose when a resident had done some due diligence on a facility located on Lewis Road between Temperance and Dean, which would be the old dry cleaner on the east side of the road. At that time, Sheryl was notified that there may be issue with chemicals, which were, and I'm not going to steal your thunder here, Sheryl, but chemicals that were used in the dry cleaning process that may have, for lack of a better term, moved in the groundwater. Of no fault of the current owner, this would have been something that was historical. So maybe some poor practices that might have happened, dumping on the ground, maybe some leaching, spills, things like that. Things that are very, very historical, though. Things that had happened, who knows when, a long time ago. But at this point, what had happened, we were made aware in late fall that the DEQ was doing some groundwater testing and air monitoring at homes around the area. And I'm going to let Sheryl speak to that in a minute here. And what happened is that we were going along very, very smoothly until late January, early February, when, for lack of a better term, we started to get a couple of hits where this vapor intrusion from the chemicals used in the dry cleaning process started to, or did exceed the recommended levels at 2 homes. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheryl here real quick to give some background on the testing procedures and things like that.
Yes, good evening. Well, what we did do some
like Chris said, some groundwater testing out there. But initially, we went in and took some homes that kind of adjoined the old dry cleaner property, and we did some vapor indoor air sampling. And then we also did some what we call soil gas or subslab to evaluate if there was a potential for vapors to get into any of the residential homes. And then there was one commercial building also that we did this work. And as Chris said, everything initially came back pretty good. We didn't see anything in the initial residence. We did some work, but as we did some additional testing, we did find 2 homes where we had both exceedances in indoor air samples, and then also in what we call the soil gas samples. Excuse me, one of the homes had an exceedance of soil gas. One we weren't able to do, but that were above the screening levels that showed this dry cleaning compound in there. So at that point in time, we worked with the health department and DHHS to make notifications to these 2 residents, and the health department gave them an option to temporarily relocate when the DEQ now is picking up the ball to kind of install some what we call vapor mitigation systems in these homes, which will then mitigate the indoor inhalation problems. So that's kind of where we're at now with that. We've started to do the testing in the homes to kind of design the systems. It looks like we might have the systems within the next week or 2. And we're continuing to also do some groundwater sampling. We did some initial sampling on the dry cleaner property, the old dry cleaner property. We did find some exceedances in groundwater, some levels that were somewhat elevated. Maybe not quite as bad as what I assumed initially, but we're probably going to step out and do some additional groundwater sampling, install some wells on some of the residential properties now. And we'll also be going forward, just because we had a couple hits, and doing some additional, getting access to do some more work at some residents, kind of stepping out a little bit further than our initial footprint. So that's kind of our next phase, and well, if I'm missing anything at this point in time, but I think that's kind of a synopsis. So I guess open it up for any questions.
Well, I just want to personally thank Bill Decker for all his work
Yes.
and forthcoming and working with you guys and his efforts that he doesn't have to do to, do whatever he has to do to clean up the site. And I think that's very noble of him, and I appreciate it. So.
Yeah, Bill's definitely offered to, if there's anything imminent that that he needs to mitigate, that he is willing to do that. So we appreciate that too.
Yeah. Questions, Mr. Francis?
Are these chemicals something that you have to remove the soil?
Well, what we're doing, since we don't have a liable party, or we don't think we have a viable liable party at this point in time, it would be their responsibility. We are going to mitigate the unacceptable exposures. And then Mr. Decker, since he did his due diligence and did everything appropriately, does not have to do the cleanup of the property. I think he may take some steps to kind of, if we find there is an old underground storage tank there, he is liable, or not liable, he's responsible to kind of remove the liquids from that, which he has agreed to do. But right now, we would not, as the state, come in and actually dig up the soil or clean up the groundwater. I think if you can remove the source or show the source isn't there anymore, it may be that this attenuates after a while and kind of cleans itself up. But we are right now just trying to mitigate any unacceptable exposures, and that's kind of where we're, in the process.
So until you find the source and stop it, you might have to come back, you might find some more properties that are...
Right, and that's what our plans are right now, is to kind of step out. Right now, we just surrounded the old dry cleaner building pretty much with our, to get the closest properties, but we want to step out a little further since we did have a couple exceedances.
Ms. Tinneberry?
How does it get in their water? Don't they have city water there?
Well, it's actually in what we consider groundwater, so it's not in their drinking water. It's in the soil vapor that's actually can move either in soil itself or in groundwater along with the groundwater. So the groundwater in this area is pretty shallow, and I think Chris has attested that a lot of areas a lot of the area around here is pretty shallow groundwater, so if you get a leak or a spill onto the ground, it can go through the soil pretty quickly and get into groundwater.
I get that, I just don't understand what, if they get their water from the city water, I don't understand what groundwater, how that would bother any of them. My other question is about the vapor. How does that get through their cement basement?
Through cracks potentially, and then all of these residents do have sumps, and we did do a little bit of testing of that. We did testing just actually yesterday of some of the water coming into the sumps, and we did get results back today, so this is kind of new information. It did show that there were some of these chemicals actually in that sump water too.
Okay, we have other dry cleaning businesses throughout Bedford or Lambertville, Temperance. I mean, is this something that the DEQ comes and tests these? How do we know that this isn't happening in other areas?
There's always that potential. We don't normally, I guess we don't have the resources to go out and test each one of the dry cleaners. So a lot of times we get our information from somebody doing their due diligence and submitting a report to us, or if somebody, an old dry cleaner self-reports. They, if they have a spill or something, they should report it, but they don't always do that.
So is there financial liability for these homeowners that, just unaware they
No,
bought these homes and,
no.
oh, no okay.
No, at this point in time, the state is actually going to pick up the cost of doing the investigation and doing the mitigation.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'd like to see this.
What Nancy's saying though, like a newer laundromat, do we have to be concerned with a newer operation, or is it kind of how they operated older laundromats?
It's probably pretty much more at the older laundromats. I can't speak for all, but I think some newer laundromats have gone to using different kind of solvents or dry cleaning solutions that aren't maybe as harmful. But yeah, it's mainly these historical ones, and we do know that there are historical laundromats out there, and there are potential concerns, and it would be nice to be able to go in, but unless we have information that there's been a release, we really can't do anything.
Any other questions from board members? No?
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for being here. We appreciate it.
Okay, I do have some, we put together fact sheets on this, so I think you posted a couple, but if anybody wants some hard copies of
I
it.
handed them, we'll have a public comment in a
Okay.
few minutes.
Yeah.
I handed them out to each trustee. Each trustee has the fact sheets, so
Okay.
if you wanted to leave them on the table for homeowners to take,
I can do that.
could do that too.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you guys very much. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, item 4, Barry Lulich with the Knox Company. Come on up.
Thank you, council members.
You state your name and address for the
Yeah,
record.
my name is Larry Lulich with the Knox Company. I've been with the Knox Company on a national and a regional level for over 18 years with Knox. My experience is very heavily involved with the fire industry myself. Back in my younger days, I used to carry an air pack on my back.
Hey, Larry,
until
just direct your comments to the board, please.
until I had kids and then therefore went in the real world. The reason why I'm here today is to address relating to the objective relating to Knox and the social media aspect that I've been seeing and hearing relating to what's been going on here within the municipality and jurisdiction. Unfortunately today, social media kind of has pros and cons. And what we have experienced just recently, give an example, what we experienced with in Chicago with the actor Slamet, who basically there was a pre-judgment before the facts came out. Also relating to Covington, Kentucky with the high school down there, which I'm actually very involved with down there with the municipality, on a pre-judgment on these poor high school kids relating to what happened down there. So the reason why I'm here is to state the facts and some history relating to Knox. Relating to the municipality and jurisdiction in the fire industry, there is approximately 32,000 fire departments here in the United States. However, that number is a mythical number because relating to a structural aspect of things, out of 32,000 fire departments, there's approximately 26,000 that actually fight structural fires. The remaining balance, council, is basically people that the municipalities of the fire industry, they don't fight with the forestry, highway patrol. So out of the 26,000 municipalities and jurisdictions, Knox has actually a relationship with close to 25,000 of these municipalities across the country that utilize the Knox products. What's so unique about this product? Yes, the product is in code. And how it has been actually implemented in code is, in all due respect, because of the respect and reputation of the product. The main thing is UL listing. In the International Fire Code, section 506, 507 of the code basically states the UL listing. UL listing is a very broad statement. Relating to UL, we talk about physical attack. Because in all due respect, the Knox company had to write a criteria and a spec for UL relating to the physical attacking of the product. Today, we end up hearing a lot of controversy relating to what's going around the country. It was brought up on your social media relating to Austin, Texas, about a possibly key that was stolen. In the history of Knox, and I'm going to say this again, in the history of Knox, out of approximately 25,000 departments that utilize Knox, just in the state of Michigan, there's over 800. Across the border in Ohio, there's over 1,300 municipalities that utilize Knox. There's never been a reported incident of anybody physically breaking into a Knox box when the box is installed per specification. And I'll mention it again. There's never been a reported incident of anybody physically breaking into a Knox box when the box is physically installed per the specification. Unfortunately, relating to the social media that we're hearing today, one of the topics I saw on your media site
just try to direct your comments to us, please.
was directly through Austin, Texas. The situation there in Austin, Texas is they did not have key retention system in their apparatus. Here, the municipality and jurisdiction and the fire department has invested in key retention system relating to their master key. They have accountability. They know when that key was attempted, they know that key when it was used, and when that key was put back into place. They have true key accountability relating to the master key for this municipality. In Austin, Texas, the key was stolen. It was physically stolen by a bad person. The bad person is now in jail. Same in Seattle. The person is in jail. So it's that mythical comments of relating to that, hey, the key was reprimanded. The key was stolen. They never had key retention in their apparatus. So here in the city of Bedford, the fire chief has retention system in his apparatus. And he can do a complete audit trail on the functionality and the utilization of that key. There's also been conversations on trademark issues. Knox is a patented product. We have trademarks. Knox has physically gone after people, and people are behind bars today, serving time, that have actually tried to infringe on the product itself. There has been products that have been stolen directly from employees at the Knox company who tried to reverse keys. Because what's so unique about this product is the equipment can't be purchased. There's been talk of locksmiths trying to say that they can physically reverse, but the thing is you can't get the ball bearings and the equipment utilized to try to do this because it's a trademark product. So I'm here today to try to more or less relieve the tension in the municipality here relating to some business owners, et cetera, relating to the security aspect of this. Our product is recognized by Homeland Security. Every military base in the United States utilizes Knox. And another question is the largest pharmaceutical retailer, CVS, Walmart, Rite Aid, Walgreens, it's spec'd in their buildings to put a Knox box on it. And we know what's inside that business, nothing but drugs and narcotics. So I hope I'm able to address some of the conversations and the concerns that may have been presented to the chief and to the city here in Bedford. Thank you.
Comments from board members? Mr. Clements?
Can you go over the process from the time a business orders the Knox box, how that takes place, how it arrives, delivers, installs, so that that can be cleared up definitively for me?
So as a business owner within the municipalities, they would purchase the product. It's approved by the fire department. It has to be approved before it even comes into the municipality and jurisdiction. Once the product gets shipped, it's shipped in the open position. The lock core is shipped directly to the fire department. Once they go out there to lock up that box, they install that lock core. Then they make an appointment, of course, with the business owner to meet them out there to put their keys inside the vault.
So at no point in time when it arrives, the owner of the Knox box, who's going to be physically putting it on their building, never has access to a key, never touches a key. The key always remains with the fire department, correct?
That's correct, and that's a restricted key.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's the cylinder as well. The cylinder.
The
gets
cylinder's a
sent to the-
restricted cylinder. There's patents, there's trademarks involved in it. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about the boxes from 2003, how they're different? Are they less secure?
Well, they're
They've
the same
changed a lot.
integrity. Yes, it's the same integrity. The UL listing against physical attack. That's what's actually in the code. Boxes today are all hinge door versus lift-off door, so that's basically, it's just been the change. The integrity of the vault that's utilized with our U.S. military, the government, federal buildings, jewelry stores, it's the same boxes that are utilized here in the city. The other important thing is obviously with the box, someone that's been involved in the fire industry for decades, is that we always recommend that the box be tied in the alarm system. Because again, there's never been a reported incident of anybody physically breaking into a box when it's installed per specifications on the building. Because if somebody took a sledgehammer or somebody tried to pry that box open, the alarm system would go off. And in all due respect, you'd have more blue flashing lights in front of the building than you can imagine.
I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Montry?
Is this the first time you've had to come address a municipality that has been concerned about this process?
No.
Is it common?
It's not common, no. I maybe go 4 trips a year. I may go to address more of a code issue than anything else. Because the question is always asked, why is the product in code? Well, in all due respect, yes, it's in 506, 507 the International Fire Code. It's no different than smoke alarms, fire extinguishers, fire lanes. It's all involved in the fire prevention. Because what's so unique is, hey, as the municipality wants to save money, the fire department is actually saving the taxpayers thousands of dollars a year. Because we all know if we have to wait around for a key holder or break down a door, my apparatus is running for a half hour to an hour, and my diesel fuel is burning. Plus, if I have to break down a door or break down a window, the service end from the fire department, they're tied up. They have to physically stay there until somebody comes and boards up that building. So what do you think may happen if I have to respond to another call? I'm shorthanded. Or I may have to call mutual aid in. So the big picture is, sure, there's a value to the municipality and jurisdiction. Since 1975, as I mentioned, 25,000 municipalities utilize the product. And it's there for a reason. Added safety and to reduce costs on the municipality and jurisdiction. Because if the chief's spending $17,000, say on average a year on fuel, his fuel costs will be cut because I'm running my apparatuses almost half the time.
Any more questions from anybody on the board? Do you have any more you want to add? Because I'm going to open up the
No,
public
that's good.
comment, and then
No,
I'm sure
thank you.
you're going to come up after that, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, okay, number 5 is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes, and this is for board agenda items, so if you want to comment on the Knox specs, now would be the time to comment, or any other agenda item, so come on up. And any questions we have on the Knox, Larry will address.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 13-way Brandywine Street. This is in the agenda, information, Monroe County Sheriff Contract Summary Report for 2019, January 2019. If you look at the report, 419.7 hours on patrol for January, not one single traffic citation. I realize January is a tough month because of the weather, but that is about a little over 1/5 of what took place for the entire year last year. 2,170.5 hours on patrol, not a single traffic ticket. They also went 302 other hours on this last month, and I don't know what they did for 302 hours. It's pretty obvious that no matter what I say up here, nothing's going to change. I can give you statistics until I'm blue in the face, and nothing will change. And I'm not so sure that anything you've said or will say will change anything. So this is what we have. I put something on your desk here, which I'll comment during the 5 minutes. It's the summary report. It says breakdown of fines due to cities, townships, and villages for the whole entire year of December 2018, from January to December of 2018. And if you look at those numbers, they're striking as to what townships generate the most amount of money through fines and traffic costs and stuff. I don't want to get into it right now, but I can tell you this, that townships that have state law, they've adopted into ordinances, they're the ones that get the money back. If they don't have the state law in there and tickets are written under state law, that goes to the library fund. So everything that's written by the Michigan State Police goes to the library fund. So these numbers do not reflect the Michigan State Police. They reflect the Sheriff's Department and local jurisdictions like the city and whatever. So the bottom line is, when you look at that, you have to remember that the township, if they've not adopted state law, a ticket could be written under state law and wouldn't show any money. If it's under state ordinance, if the ordinance has been accepted, then it would be under, you'd get the fine money.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Hello, Bill Decker Jr., 2790 18 Road. I haven't filed this knock box, but I have 6 of them on my building in Adrian, where the fire chief was, or actually Madison Township. And I can tell you, I don't understand why anybody would be against it. I mean, in my particular case, it's been used 3 times. They got there before I did, and they did their job. I mean, they happen to be false alarms on all 3, but I assure you, I'll put it on my building on Lewis Avenue and any other one that I would do. So if they could help on the cost of them, that'd be great. But other than that, I don't know the negative side of it. I wouldn't understand it, to be honest with you. So I just thought I'd say that. And if I could, I am the one on Lewis Avenue, and the DEQ came out based on a baseline assessment that I did when I bought the property, and that's what red flagged it. And the adjoining neighbor, both people that just bought in the last year, were the 2 houses that they are doing their work on. So it's unfortunate, but my responsibility would be a none on mine. I just cooperated with them, and I can tell you, both from the health department and from the DEQ, you couldn't ask for any more support. So they've been tremendous. So thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, Tim Gianni, 3818 Concierge Road, Lambertville. I'm talking about the knockbox. I can tell you from experience that it's a fine product. I have one. I bought it. I have commercial property in Lambertville, and I got no qualms with the quality of the box. I got qualms with the township forcing businesses to put this up, to spend the money to do it. I've had this property in my family since 1954s. We had a fire in 1990 in this building, and we had to reconstruct the roof, but the fire department didn't have any problem getting in there. The fire was already too far gone to have made a difference, and I don't see where having a key is going to make a difference. If you need to get in the building, the fire department's going to get in the building, going through the glass, going through the door, whatever the case may be. For me, it's a principle that this township has adopted international fire code that forces the business people to have to spend money that for all these years we've not had to do this. It's not a big deal to me because I have one building. But people that have a lot of buildings, it becomes a big deal at $375 a box. It's just a principle. To take that further, my tenants don't want their keys in that box, and I don't blame them. And you can talk about the integrity of the system and all that stuff. It just takes one bad apple to screw this up, and then the township's got some liability, in my opinion. I'm not an attorney, but if somebody got in, if the gentleman spoke of a problem that they had in the past because there was a bad guy. Pardon me?
Your time is up.
Okay.
You had to be.
I'm against it.
Okay. Any more comments from the public? Come on up. Come on. Anybody more?
My name's Larry Hackman. I live at 8834 Secor Road in Lambertville. And my concern is I'm a home-based business where I pretty much just got an office in my house. Nobody comes to my house to do business, everything like that. It's all dispatched out, or I get in my vehicles and drive. Would I be required to have a lockbox on my house?
If you live,
Because I have
if you
too
live
many
in the,
personal items that I'm afraid would be.
if you live in the business, no.
No, my business, I have a home-based business in my house.
You don't have to then.
Okay, thank you.
Any more comments from the public?
Tim Fitzgerald, 9195 Lewis Avenue. I think everybody in this room and in Bedford knows that I'm against these boxes, and I agree with Mr. Janney. It's the principle of it. You know, you can bring a salesman into town and tell us how great they are, and heck, I don't think anybody's saying it's not a beautiful box. It's not really the point. We can argue it till we're blue in the face whether or not I can cut that box open in 2 minutes or not. Really not the point. You know, these are relatively, new to the criminal system, but criminals have a way of adapting with the new technologies that come out. They always do. If you can make it, somebody can break it. And they're going to continue to learn how to get into these things, especially if it becomes a standard across the United States. They're going to figure it out. I mean, you'd have to be absolutely stupid not to believe that. We appreciate you flying all the way out here to convince us how great they are. I'm sure they are a fine product, but they're still just steel, and people are smarter than steel are. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Dale Track, 2842 Sanibel Lane. I've got 2 points I'd like to discuss. First is the Knox box issue. As I spoke 2 weeks ago, I spoke about when new business owners put all their capital in, they assume the risk. And that's one of the things that concerns me is if a business owner is willing to accept that risk, then they understand what they're in for. And for them to, especially a new business owner that's really running on tight margins, you look at most new businesses, 20% of them go out of business in the first year. 50% of them go out of business in the first five years. So for a capital outlay, yeah, it might be minuscule to some people, but it might be a cash register. It might be some advertising. It might be something that they don't want to put up front right away. They'll be willing to accept that risk. It's just something that you got to consider. Also, there's another thing is you're looking at setting precedent for future boards. How is this going to lay the groundwork for future boards when it comes to future Knox box issues? So those are things that you guys are going to have to weigh or already have weighed. Now, the second issue is tonight I'd like to talk about is the recording of the budget meetings. Now, this isn't something that you should be considering because somebody has requested it like myself or over the years. This is something that you guys should want to do. This is an educational tool. This is to help future board members to look at these things and say, look at the work that has to be done into these things. I remember when Mr. Steiner gave a great presentation in the spring of 2017 about how this could be, how the budget meetings could be put up, and it was followed by Mr. Welling's presentation. So I would just add that, thank you. I'd appreciate your consideration on that.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, moving on. Larry, did you want to follow up on any of those points, or? And Chief, you can come up at 2. Or next
Yep.
is discussion of the key box alternative, so.
Yeah, points were all good conversation. Just the important thing, obviously, I asked that you look up UL 1037. So again, we talk about the UL 1037, which is basically the main artery to the heart. So in all fairness, again, the criteria of the potential, you will have blue flashing lights in front of the business if someone tried to break into that box, because of the hours it would take to get in there if they were even able to get in it. And that's just the important thing to protect, not just the municipality, but also the fire department.
And that's if it's hooked up to a security system.
If the box is installed per specification, alarm or no alarm. To answer your question?
Well, no, I disagree with you on that. If it doesn't have an alarm and nobody calls the cops aren't.
No, the alarm will go off, obviously,
No,
if
if
they
it's
tamper
not
the
hooked up
box.
to an alarm, the
Oh, yeah,
box.
true.
Nobody calls the cops, they're not gonna come. I'm just for clarification, but.
And obviously, we all know it'd be a lot easier to throw a brick through the front door than actually physically break it in the box or picking a lock. So, any other questions?
No, we're good,
Okay,
Chief.
thank you.
We'll move on then to 7A, discussion on key box alternatives. Phil, if you want to address this, you've been working on this for a while with Chief, so you guys can work it together, but can you let us know kind of what the changes are, what the options are, and kind of what we have to consider here?
Sure. Yeah, the Chief Massengill and I have worked on this together, and we prepared a letter that was presented to the board for alternatives. And basically, the alternative would be to establish a board of review that is required or provided for, I should say, in the International Fire Code, the one we're operating under now, the 2015, and same with the 2018 International Fire Code. So if we established a Board of Appeals, which would be composed of individuals who are qualified by experience and training to pass on matters pertaining to fire hazards, explosions, hazardous conditions, fire protection systems, and so forth, you could set up a procedure whereby under the section that addresses Board of Appeals, that if an equivalent method of protection or safety could be proposed and be adequate for a particular business person, the Board of Appeals would have the authority to pass on that. There are some limitations that the chief, for the safety of his fire personnel, has suggested, and that's on the last page of my letter, and that relates to buildings or structures that contain hazardous conditions, such that they present a high hazard and increased risk to firefighters and the general public. Examples are buildings and or structures that contain hazardous materials, dangerous substances, and buildings with excessively high fire loads without fire suppression or alarm systems. Also, buildings and or structures with construction features that are known to present an increased risk to firefighters if fires are permitted to grow unchecked. The chief can address that type of architecture that where firefighters, fortunately not within our township, but in other areas, have lost their lives going into those types of structures. So time is important to be able to get in to those structures. And then multi-tenant buildings or buildings in close proximity to other structures that have a high probability of impacting neighboring buildings or structures. So one of the alternatives that has been discussed and suggested is that you install a lock box or a key box, as it's referred to in the International Fire Code. And if the owner did not want to have a key in that box where the fire department could access it and then access the building, to have a current list of individuals in descending order that could be contacted who would respond within a short period of time. Somebody that is in close proximity that could respond, so the fire department number one, can access the building. If they respond to an alarm or they respond to a report, they get there, they go around the perimeter, they don't detect anything at that point in time, but they don't want to leave the area until they're sure there's nothing going on inside the building. If someone responds, that gets them into the building without damaging the building, without knocking down a door or breaking a window. And number two, the person's there and can then lock the building back up and secure it, and then they can call off that scene and be available for other calls. So that was the thought process, to try to meet people halfway who didn't want keys, their building key, within a lockbox or a key box that, heaven forbid, could be accessed if it was. You've heard the presentation, but some people have expressed concern about that, so that is a alternative that's been discussed and raised. The chief can probably more eloquently address the fire hazards, the concerns to the fire department. The way that it's been looked at from the township's perspective, you don't necessarily want to intrude upon your business owners. This, I think, to Chief Massengill, more than anything else, is a concern for the safety of the men and women that work in our fire department, so that they can access a building quickly if needed, secure it, or take care of any situation that might exist, and then call off and go back to other duty items. But Chief, if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, just really briefly, and I know we've discussed this quite a bit. I appreciate Mr. Lulich coming in. I appreciate the business owners, their opinion, and we value that. We've weighed that heavily in the recommendations that we've made, or in the consideration we've made for it. Largely, it's the recommendation that came, and this is a recommendation, it's come from the Fire Authority Board. Mr. Francis may be able to touch on that if necessary, but the Fire Authority Board, the fire department leadership, and then myself as a fire code official, our recommendation is going to be, as we move forward, that when the 2018 code is adopted, it's adopted without a change in section 506 or without altering it. That recommendation isn't taken lightly, but we've made that recommendation based on just a couple of key principles. Number one, our mission statement in the fire department's mission to save, serve, and protect the property and the citizens in the township. We know that while there are many ways we can get into and access buildings, this is a good tool that will help us do that fast and without damage to property. So being that it does fit the mission and it helps us accomplish that mission and is the best tool that we have in a certain set of circumstances, we feel that that's a good recommendation. Second is the promotion of health, safety, and welfare for both the citizens and the firefighters. As Mr. Goldsmith touched on, this is the best way and the safest way that we can get in and access buildings and confirm or make sure, without doing damage or without putting the firefighters at risk, that there is no emergency. And largely these are used when there isn't an emergency or isn't an urgent situation in which we need to gain access to the buildings. And then the third is by and large that appeals process that he talked about. With the presence of an appeals process, we're comfortable with this recommendation because any business owner, just as they can with a fire code provision that says they have to have fire extinguishers in their building or smoke detectors in their building, can appeal any part of the code or any part of the interpretation of the code. So being that we feel it's the best tool that we can use, being that we feel that there is a process that's set forth in the code in I think section 109 of the code that allows for that process, or for the appeal process, we don't feel like in good conscience we can come to you with any recommendation other than to afford the best to the firefighters as far as doing their job. And just to wrap it up, with that being said, we certainly understand that, that the board has to make a decision based not just on the best tools that the fire department and the firefighters have. Regardless of what the decision is and regardless of what the outcome is, tomorrow we get up and we go address emergencies in whatever fashion we have to and in whatever way, so, you know, that we need to address it. So we look forward to, frankly, we look forward to direction from the board on this, hopefully tonight or in the near future, so that we can continue with our mission.
Can you give us some circumstances outside of fire where this is helpful?
So,
because obviously fire, I mean,
Right,
if the building's on fire, you're not looking to go inside of it in most situations, right?
That's not at all the case. So, by and large, when we use this, if there is a fire where the fire, when we got there, the building was heavily involved, extremely heavily involved in fire, honestly, it's a flip of a coin whether we would use it or not. If the fire was up through the roof, probably not, because we would be attacking the fire from outside. But when we want to gain access and gain entrance into the building, even with a situation where there's light smoke or there's a suspected fire where we know there's a fire somewhere in that building but we don't know where it is, that would definitely be a situation in which we would want to use a key box or a key to gain access so that we could get in and try and locate the source of the fire. And largely that's based on the different way that we're fighting fire right now. The shift has changed. It used to be that when we got to a building where there was smoke in it, or a commercial building, we would ventilate it, we would break windows and open up windows, and that fire would come rushing at us, we would find it. We've changed our strategies and tactics in the last 5-7 years in that we work very hard to control flow paths of fires, control the amount of air that we allow to get those fires, and really try to starve that fire from oxygen when it's in that early growth stage so that it doesn't get a chance to get out of control and get up through the roof where we then would need thousands of gallons a minute to get that fire in check. So largely, when we can let a door remain, so a glass door, if we were to break out a glass door to go through it, we can't control the flow of air into that fire at any point anymore. Whereas now, if we were entering a structure to search for a fire because we didn't know where it was at in a commercial structure, or even homes were doing the same things, when that first crew enters that building, we make sure that that door is generally shut behind it to try and starve that fire and keep that fire in check just by starving it of oxygen. Another instance in which we would, so that would be the fire application in which we would do it. Medical emergencies, a medical alarm, or an unknown alarm or something like that where we were called and they suspected that someone was inside, we could get in, we could check and confirm whether there was an issue or not without causing damage so that we could secure the building without doing damage to it or without spending a great amount of time going and checking in and trying to look in windows to confirm if there was a victim inside. The third, which is where it's used probably most frequently, is for fire alarms, water flow alarms, and things of that nature. We're responding to just short of one of those alarms a day now, and our firefighters are in a position when the businesses are closed after hours where oftentimes they have to make a decision based on just walking on the outside of the structure and checking to see, not seeing anything that's readily apparent, whether they should force and cause damage to a building owner's property, or whether they're just going to make an assumption that there's not a small fire growing unchecked and or water or something, water flow or something inside causing damage.
So how do you clear the building without doing that?
How would we clear the building without doing it? Well, our options generally are to breach the door or breach a window or something and cause damage, or frankly, honestly, just rely on some certain amount of luck that we can't see anything from outside and make an assumption that there's nothing inside if the members on scene chose not to cause damage to go in and confirm it.
Any more questions from the board?
Well, I guess, go ahead. Are you okay with the code, or like if you did it to the appeals board to be able to have a ID card or whatever, phone number, is that an acceptable solution to you?
If it was adopted as written and then somebody appealed it and the appeals board said no, that they could put in a phone number because they wanted the appeals board, or the appeals board agreed with the business, would I be okay with it? Is that what you're asking?
I think what your question is, you don't have to go to the appeals board, from what I'm understanding, to be able to put a card in it instead of a key. you can do that regardless. You go to the appeals board if you don't want the Knox box. That's what my understanding.
As of this.
If I can speak to it, because I'm the one that threw out the idea, so, and Chief and I talked a lot about this, and none of what my recommendation was meant to be dismissive of the fire department, but what Mr. Montre and I were talking about just before the meeting is 90% of emergency services is gray. It's not absolute. It's not yes or no, go or don't go. It's subjective. And so when you start thinking about 90% of what you do is constantly the decision of do we kick, do we not kick? What are the liabilities? What are the responsibilities? If we knock down a door, now we're not available for a cardiac patient or for an elderly person who's broken their hip. These are all the things that have to be talked about. So when I put forth the idea, it was simply this. If we have a code that says you need to have a box. If certain business owners want to exercise the right of a key, so that when the fire department shows up at their door and they suspect a fire, they grab the key, they go in, they look, and they do whatever they have to do. Another level of service, an opt, would be if a business owner says, I don't want to do that. I'm going to place in the key box a list of key holders, which this where we need to determine how many, frequent, all that stuff. But basically it allows the business owner to determine their level of participation. Now, what was interesting to me about the idea is I think one of the earlier comments was, does the government have the right to impose this idea? And trust me, I don't like government reaching into our lives and telling us what we have to do. But the fact of the matter is the government tells us we pay taxes, the government makes us renew our driver's license, the government makes us do a number of different things. So this is part of that. But I'm also very sensitive to infringement. So I truly get the idea that a business owner may not want their key in the box. I also think we have to be careful that a lot of business owners that have talked from the podium talk about their business, their application. Well, my business is X. I work after hours or I don't work after hours. As a board, we have to address every business. We have to address the business that's in a strip mall with the same set of rules as a business that's freestanding and has been there for 50 years. And we can't play exceptional circumstances there. To me, allowing the opt does two things. One, it allows us to maintain a code. It allows us to provide the level of service that I think is important to the fire department, and I think a lot of business owners are going to opt for a key. I think that's very reasonable. It also allows for business owners who are uncomfortable with that, and I think largely early on, I think you're going to see people shift from key or phone numbers of people to call over to keys pretty quickly, because they're going to realize there isn't this great concern, buildings aren't going to get broken into, there's not this boogeyman, but fundamentally, I think people have a right to make a choice. And as long as the right doesn't subject our firefighters to additional risk, I think that's something this board has to consider. So to me, the opt-in is just an easy way to stay contingent with the code and at the same time allow a business owner to make a decision with a few exceptions. And those exceptions would be the ones that the chief has listed that are high risk, pose exceptional circumstances.
But they get to make that choice of a key or a card without the appeals board.
My suggestion was prior to the appeals board.
Not the way I wrote this. Not the way you wrote it. See, that's the way I understood it. It was going to be wrote is the business owner at that point has the option to put a key or a business card or a.
As written, no. But I believe as if you did that as your amendment, then yes.
I think the problem that I had, Chief, you and I had this conversation on the phone one time, was if you have an appeals process, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, the appeal is going to be rewarded on an exceptional circumstance, correct? Because if an appeals board hears 50 cases and issues favorable findings to 49 of the appealees, it makes you question, well, why do we even have this process to begin with? So the question to me is why do we even put that layer? What is the relevancy of that layer beyond the exclusions that were listed that I think the chief is absolutely correct on? There's just certain liability areas that we can't give a pass on. They cause too much of a risk to health and safety to our community and also to the firefighters who work. But when I made the initial suggestion, my intent was not that every business had to do it and then the business owner had to jump through an appeal process. To me, it was a very simple decision up front. The business owner opts key or responder.
So I guess that goes to, is that, in your opinion, is that that would accomplish what we're trying to do with code?
Because the way I'm hearing it, the business owner gets no option at this point, the way it's written.
Well, I can address it if you'd like.
No, go ahead.
So if right now we're operating under the 2015 International Fire Code. A key box is required, and it's required to have a key in it. And so as the fire code official has been going around to businesses and presenting them with this information, a lot of business owners have complied with that requirement. We're now on the precipice of adopting the 2018 International Fire Code. They're revised every 3 years. So we wanted this issue resolved before it's placed in front of the board for adoption of the 2018 code. So if you can do it one of, I'm going to say several ways. If you adopt 506.1, then every commercial or industrial application will need a key box with a key. And then if you form a Board of Appeals, as set forth in A109.1, then anyone who didn't want to place a key could appeal to the Board of Appeals, which again would be comprised of people with experience in fire science. So then, if they could convince the Board of Appeals that there's an equivalent, I'm taking this right out of the code, an equivalent method of protection or safety is available or proposed, and the Fire Board of Appeals found that to be acceptable, then they could use that equivalent method of protection, which could include the placement of a card with phone numbers. I think what TC is saying is this: we would have to amend 506.1 to provide for the installation of a key box and either a key or information within that key box that would allow somebody to respond quickly, with the exception of certain areas that have been identified by the chief and that I identified in the letter. That would have to be carefully written into 506.1. Key box required, you can have a key, or you can have a card, what I'll refer to as a card with numbers, contact numbers. But in certain applications, a key will always be required.
So there is
Ultra hazardous.
There is no option, according to this, where you don't have to put a box on to the board. Like, you can't appeal to the board that you don't want to put a box on, from what I'm hearing.
Well,
because that,
there
to me,
would
there's
have to be an
businesses out there.
alternate,
There's
there'd have to
businesses
be an
out there.
alternate method. The appellant would have to convince the Board of Appeals that there is an equivalent method of protection. So whatever that might be, but it's a drafting exercise is what it is. 506.1, you could draft it such that you could have require the key box, key or card, except that in these specific enumerated situations, you have to have a box and you have to have a key for the protection of our firefighters, because these situations exist at your place of business, or the building is constructed in a manner that quick access is imperative to protect the safety of the firefighters. So you can draft it either way. I think what the chief was proposing as an alternate is that a key box be required in all commercial industrial applications, but that a business owner could appeal to the Board of Appeals, propose an alternate equivalent method of protection, which could be...
What's some examples of an alternate equivalent?
Well, the prime example that we're talking about tonight is the a list of numbers, good numbers, where people can respond.
But you have to put that in a box.
You'd have to put that in a box.
There's no equivalent to opt out of the box, is what I'm saying.
I don't know that I don't know
That's
that
what
the
I-
chief has any
that's the way I-
suggestions along those lines.
That's the way I kind of portrayed it to you all along is if a business owner has a business, okay, it's residential, it stands alone, you can see inside that, you know, the building could be cleared, and he says, I don't want this Knox box because I don't feel like I need it. He can go to the appeals board and they could say, you're right, we don't feel like you need it either. The door costs $100, knock it down.
So just to make sure we're clear, the International Fire Code doesn't address residential businesses,
But if you don't live in it,
but a business in a
you have to put a
residential
Knox box on it.
So that's correct, unless you offered up an alternative that met the same intent. So if the appeals board said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Goldsmith, so if the appeals board said, okay, this business owner does not want to put a box on their property, or on their building, and they've offered up this alternative to that box, then the appeals board would have to determine whether or not that alternative meets a clear enough standard that it affords the same level or a similar level of protection.
That appeal would always be available
And
if
that
we have
appeal-
a Board of Appeals.
Yes, sir.
I probably misspoke that 506.1 requires the key box. If you have a Board of Appeals, any appellant could, if they can convince the Board of Appeals with good evidence that there's a alternate method of equivalent protection, then the Board of Appeals could say, yeah, you're right. You don't need a box. You don't need a box, and this is what you'll do, and it will be duly noted, and the fire department will be advised. Something along those lines would work. Or they could say, if a business owner says, I don't want a key, but I am willing to put the box on and have this card, and I don't fall within this class of buildings, or I don't conduct a hazardous type business, and I don't have hazardous chemicals on site and so forth, the appeals board could say, you're right, a card will suffice with current information that you will keep current so that somebody can
But it all
respond.
has to do with an appeals board. It has nothing to do with the business owner saying, having a choice and saying, I don't want.
Unless you draft 506.1 to say you can have either or, unless you fall within these hazardous structures or material situation. It could be drafted that way.
We can draft an amendment.
Mr. Steiner?
You know, I've listened and heard very good points on both sides of this, so it's a tough decision to make. But one of the things I want to just ask you the question, whether somebody's got a box on their business or whether they do not have a box on the business. With today's technology, you know, number one is whether it's a card or wherever, the phone numbers have to be kept updated. And you know what? It's one of those things that you don't have a fire, and maybe 2 years from now, you know what? I never updated those numbers in my box or wherever it's on record. Oh, well, that friend of mine isn't even living around here anymore. This employee that was on the call list doesn't even work for me anymore. So you have to make sure that's updated. But the real question that I'm really surprised with today's technology, it hasn't come up. Look at the schools. When there's a school delays or closures, they have messaging go out immediately. Is there any kind of software or software database tool that the businesses, so if say, okay, there's a fire alarm at Sidelines, that dispatch could go in and they could hit the button, whatever, and you would assign a code. Look up Sidelines. Sidelines is code number 123. You hit 123, boom, message goes out to those 3 people immediately on that call list. And to have that, whether there's a box on the building or not on the building, that those people get alerted that there's a potential fire or water flow issue within your property.
So I wouldn't doubt that technology exists. I can share with you confidently that our dispatching through Monroe County, that they don't have the capacity or the ability with their current program to do that. We could, as a township, could certainly look into it, but I don't know if it would be financially possible.
It's worth at
to
least
have that.
investigating to see if
So-
there's even a tool out there.
Well, because that was something Craig brought up, was, you know, I'm gonna have to spend $500-600 to get this box installed to put a phone number in it. You know, isn't there a system out there better than that? I'm not gonna support this unless we have an option for the business owners to be able to put a key or a card in it. I think that should be their choice, not the appeals board. Now, I'm okay with the appeals board saying, you know, going to them for the box or not, but as far as the key goes, I think they should have an option themselves to put the key or the card in it.
Not that I'm advocating for the cost, but I'd be willing to bet you if you got the price of a system that could be done locally within Bedford. Again, not advocating for you business owners, but I bet they'd be willing to spend $50-60 and say, put this toward that as like a registration fee instead of $375. So it's just a thought.
Yeah, we could look into any option for technology that keeps up there, or to keep a database. We're trying to move towards that with our apparatus and get even some form of onboard technology in our apparatus, because we don't have any right now. And the long-term goal is going to be that, to have technology in all of our apparatus. But again, it's nothing that I'm aware of, or it's nothing that is we're on the cusp of as we stand today.
Can I ask a couple questions about the, like what would be the ones that would, if we had this alternative, would not be? One was buildings or structures that contain hazardous conditions such that they present a high standard and increase risk to firefighters and the general public. Examples are buildings, structures that contain hazardous materials, dangerous substances, and buildings with excessively high fire loads without fire suppression alarm systems. Why would that be under the heading of can't have an opt-out?
Because they pose an excessively high threat to our firefighters, to the residents or the citizens at large. So a great example, and I don't want to pick on any specific business, so that's not my intent. A great example of that would likely be the Marathon crude oil facility in the north.
So, go ahead.
To allow them to opt out so that we had difficulty. I mean, they've got some pretty good security features for protecting vehicles getting in and out. If God forbid there was an incident up there, it's going to be a significant and a serious incident if it ever happened. And the ability to have 24 hours a day, to have access into and out of that is frankly would be unconscionable not to have. So in an instance like that, I would struggle to think that regardless of the board decision, that we wouldn't have some provision because it poses such a significant.
So the reason I ask is when we had originally talked about that, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and kind of like moved on, and then I thought about it, and it was like, if that is the case, Marathon's on fire is how you're getting in a Knox box key. Or like, are you sending in, like, I was just kind of like thinking through the actual situation of, are we sending our firefighters into that and using a Knox box key to enter it, or?
That is essentially by far the fastest way. So that facility is a great example because there's not a glass door to break that allows us in fast. You're talking about security gates and a system that is designed to keep vehicles and things out. So absolutely, we would really, I wouldn't want to say had no choice, but that would be absolutely the fastest and best way to gain access to the grounds in that facility in that case.
Because, like, I guess I was thinking, man, I don't even know if you'd send, if that place is on fire, are you sending firefighters into?
Well, we understand that's.
You know what I mean? That's why I'm like thinking, I'm like, I don't even know if we would go, if we feel like you'd more like, let's evacuate the premises around it.
So you've got to understand that they've got, and this is off the top of my head, but probably 9 of those tanks. If there was a compromise, which is very rare and very unlikely, but if one of those 9 tanks had a situation where there was a fire in that tank, we absolutely, while it would be a very, very, very high risk operation for us, the the danger would be compounded if we didn't try to, at a minimum, place apparatus to control it and confine it to one of those tanks. Because the reality is we think it would be a disaster and be dangerous for the community. And the spill and overflow zones with one of those tanks, which is something like 3/4 or a half mile of crude oil that's on fire, if there was a boil over splashing out. The evacuation zone for this one tank is significant. The evacuation zone for multiple tanks and the amount of water that would take to try and control that and the impact it would have on the community would be devastating. So we absolutely would have, while we always weigh the risks to our firefighters versus the rewards that we have to gain, it's likely that at least early on in the incident, we would have to go in there and try to deal with that.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking through it, like, just kind of realistically, like, of what would be the case. The second one, building or structures with construction features that are known to present an increased risk to firefighters if fires are permitted to grow unchecked. And then that, I think Phil said, like, kind of, that you would maybe talk on that, like, such as?
Yeah, so a great example of that would be like roof truss construction or bowstring construction, where like in some of the older buildings, bigger commercial buildings, they've got the false ceilings like we would see in here. And the construction of the roof trusses is that it's very strong under normal load, snow load, water load, but it's prone to early failure under fire loads. So almost year in and year out, firefighters are killed in buildings such as that, like a bowling alley, or there was a sofa factory down in, I think, the Carolinas, where the firefighters went in to investigate an alarm. They didn't have any fire visible to them because the ceiling generally stayed intact, but there was a heavy fire load above them that caused them, when they poked up and introduced air, again, when we were talking about it, when they introduced air by pushing up some ceiling tiles, caused an early failure of the entire ceiling system. They were overcome by the fire load, and it ultimately, year in and year out, kills firefighters. So and they're infrequent. Most of them were built in the 70s. Now they're becoming less and less frequent. But in a building that is known to be essentially a death trap for firefighters when they're just investigating fire alarms, we feel that it's important that we allow our firefighters, number one, to have access to that so they can get in, so they don't have to make an assumption based on not seeing whether or not there's a fire in that, number one. Number two, to be able to, if they chose to enter the building, to have access to it so they could close the door behind them and essentially not create what we, again, a flow path or the introduction of air by breaking out a door or something, and then and would give them the best opportunity to investigate without causing damage, as well as the safest way that they could do it themselves.
So is that something that you can assess, like, pretty quickly, like looking at a building? Like,
Yeah.
if you went up, you know, okay, that's going to be.
You should know, for the most part, the training that we had, or the training that our officers have and our firefighters, there's a lot of training on building construction and features like that. It's drilled in from early on, even in fire school, for members that don't have to do that, to start understanding that, because it's such an uncharacteristically dangerous situation for
Do we have buildings with those kind of structures in
few.
Bedford Township?
A
Okay.
few. Yeah.
And then the last one is the multi-tenant buildings or buildings close proximity to other structures that have high probability of impacting neighboring buildings and/or structures. Kind of, again, is just the why.
And this is something that we talked about, I think, in some of our earlier meetings. It was more of, and this may be something that you can help me touch on even more, because I know that this is the part of the subject that's close to your heart. In enforcing it, or forcing a building owner to do something that they don't want to do, and you and I have discussed, I think, that an opt-out is okay, so long as it doesn't put a neighbor that doesn't have that same, I guess maybe I'm going to turn the question around on you and ask you to help me explain.
Well, so the reason why I'm asking the question is kind of like what TC and I were discussing, like right before the meeting. He said, and my understanding was, if there's a fire or like there's an immediate situation, we're more or less not using the Knox box. We're kicking that door and we're moving. We're not gonna go get a key and let ourselves in. So that's why that's why I was asking for that question, is because that's saying, all right, we got a fire here. It might be affecting multiple people. That's why we would have to have the key, which I understand, but then I'm like, but if there is.
Right. So if there's a fire and it was up through the roof, likely that we're going to be throwing water on it from outside. That's a well-developed fire. What would be more likely would be, for a multi-tenant space, would be we see smoke in that building, but we don't know whether it's a grease fire, a pan that's on fire, you know what I mean, that's causing a lot of smoke. So if we couldn't readily see the fire or know exactly what the source of the smoke is, even though we know there's a fire of some sort, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, we would be more likely to use the key so that we can control the closing of that door behind our firefighters as they investigate it, number one. And number two, if it's found to be an insignificant issue, like a pot on the stove that the restaurant had left on and forgot, we're not causing damage to the structure to take the pot off the stove, open up the doors, and ventilate the structure. So it's the reality is no. If we pulled up and the entire structure was burning, not realistic that we would use it, but for a certain percentage of other fires, and I couldn't tell you what that split is.
Gray areas.
It's gray area. It's going to honestly be situational based on what the officer that arrives on scene finds and makes a determination on in a split second. So,
Mr. Spricker?
Phil, can you answer with the two options that you've outlined here? Is the liability on the township greater with one than the other, same?
Well, if somebody wanted to propose an alternate method, probably, and not comply with what I called my letter, the strict requirements of Section 506, we would most likely ask them to sign a waiver stating that they recognize that the International Fire Code of 2018, as adopted by the Township Board, requires this, this, and this. They have proposed an alternate method, and that's been accepted by the Fire Board of Appeals. And in connection with that, they're releasing the township from liability because they've made the decision on their own, an informed decision, to not comply with the strict requirements, but to use an alternate method that may not be as good as having a key in a box for fast and quick entry, but would be acceptable to the Board of Appeals. So, does that answer your question? So the liability, if 506 is complied with to the T, then I don't see any liability on the part of the township. If a proposed alternate method is used, more than likely a waiver of liability would be requested from the property owner.
So whether we have the appeals or we just let them, the waiver would be in place either way.
I think we would endeavor to write it fairly so that would be a requirement, yes.
Ms. Tinnever?
I thought Phil's letter was very well done and explained everything to me. My only question is, why is it just commercial and industrial buildings and not governmental buildings?
For the intent of the code, government buildings also would be, it is covered, I would say, correct?
Yeah, I think, yes, I think a lock key box would be required for a government building. I think a key box.
Well, it only says commercial and industrial.
Yeah.
Schools are not commercial or industrial, neither are post offices or the township hall or the park. I mean, do we have key boxes in all of our buildings?
This building.
Park buildings?
I don't.
Not this
know
one.
about the park building.
Park, maintenance building? I mean, really?
Well, I think we
need to
should have
comply.
one on our maintenance. If we're going to require
That's right.
citizens, I think we should have one on our maintenance building. especially our maintenance building, because that structure imposes some unique situations to firefighters because of the architecture and the construction. So I don't disagree with you. I wrote it focusing in on commercial industrial simply because that was the focus of our inquiry. But I don't disagree with you. I think it should be on governmental buildings.
Schools.
We might have,
Post office.
I would want to see it on schools.
I agree.
We might have some challenges there because, our building code doesn't apply to schools. There's some restrictions under state law. But I would think the
This doesn't have
International
any-
Fire
this
Code
isn't the
applies.
building code, though.
No, this is the internet. I'm just giving you an example that schools sometimes have a special set of rules imposed, which restricts local units of government from enforcing certain ordinances and so forth. But I think the International Fire Code would apply to schools. So, yes, I think it would be appropriate for governmental buildings. They're not accepted under the International Fire Code. At least my review of it doesn't indicate that.
Correct. And to be clear, this subject was brought to the head because there was inconsistency. So to have it on the buildings here, to have it on the, some of the township buildings, but not all, doesn't meet the intent of the code. And as the discussion and the topic in the community started when last summer we said, hey, listen, we've got to be consistent with our enforcement, which includes a maintenance building. Now, I don't do the inspections, so I don't know when the schedule is. When the schedule is that we inspect annually the maintenance buildings and the libraries and things like that. But certainly, not our intent, but our practice has been to address it during the annual inspection process at each building. So if the maintenance building does not have one yet, and I honestly don't know the answer to that, then it would be addressed as part of the annual fire inspection.
It doesn't have one yet. The township just recently put one on, I think 2 months ago.
Okay.
Well,
And
I'm just saying it should be equally enforced overall. I mean, I'm even thinking churches, and if we're talking about the safety of our firefighters and the safety of the building, some of these churches, as you were talking about the ceilings, I mean, some of these churches are constructed many, many, many years ago, and I just think that we're talking about safety here, not about, just enforcing spot check.
I get what you're saying, but wouldn't a church be considered a commercial building?
It is for the purpose of the International Fire Code. It is
It's the house of
considered.
God, he's not commercial.
I think the only thing it doesn't address is residential dwellings
So
that
residential
you
dwellings or
occupy.
residential businesses, and by residential businesses, the fire code doesn't provide any jurisdiction for a business that is contained within someone's private residence, and that's to protect the private residence itself. So we don't inspect or enforce the International Fire Code in a private dwelling, regardless if there's a business contained in that private dwelling or not. Now, that's not to be confused with someone who's using a residential structure as a business. And the real caveat is somebody's occupying it, living and sleeping there as their primary residence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
get that.
Mr. Montry?
Would we be able to draft an amendment to this code before adopting it, that if it stated that there would be 2506 would be the signee, who would be the business owner of private property, which I think would exclude like the Marathon, and even if we had those 3 buildings, that if the owner gives full permission and assumes all liability, and like that there's that like piece to it, would we be able to adopt an amendment like that to the fire code?
To do what? To not have a knockbox?
To have it as an opt-out, option to 506. Have that be drafted into our fire code, that Okay, here's the fire code. Okay, well, you're not compliant to International Fire Code because you don't have a Knox box. But if you sign off, I give the Bedford Fire Department full permission to kick my door in if a Bedford Fire Department personnel believes that there is like a life or safety issue, that they can kick that door in. They have my full permission, and I assume all liability for that kicked-in door.
You're looking at him, not me.
I wouldn't recommend it. I think that should go in front of the Board of Appeals. But that's a board decision. Could it be written that way? Yes. But you're pretty much
For the
wiping
public's
out
purposes, could you explain to the public what that means and not by saying 506 because they don't have
Okay,
what we have?
so I'll read it. Where required, so this is the Chapter 5 of the International Fire Code, entitled Fire Service Features. Section 506 addresses key boxes. Section 506.1 states as follows. Where required, where access to or within a structure or an area is restricted because of secured openings, where immediate access is necessary for life-saving or firefighting purposes, the fire code official is authorized to require a key box to be installed in an approved location. The key box shall be of an approved type listed in accordance with UL 1037 and shall contain keys to gain necessary access as required by the fire code official. So you would have an amendment in that. Fire code official says you're not compliant, you don't have a key box, but in Bedford Township, there is a opt-out amendment. You sign off, giving full permission, assuming all liability, and probably, I'm sure there's other like things that would have to be in there, and I'm sure the legalese would not say kick the door in, but that's to what I'm referring.
I wouldn't recommend that for this reason, and it's part of what's contained in the code. Where immediate access is necessary for life-saving or firefighting purposes. The chief has already provided an example where you wouldn't want to kick the door in and ventilate the area in the event of a fire. My main concern is our firefighters when they're responding to incidents like this. He's provided, I think, a perfect example of why you may not want to break a door down or break a plate glass window or kick a door in to gain access. So it's not so much, in my way of thinking, avoiding liability to the township and allowing the property owner to make that decision for them. That's fine as a decision for them, that if they say, go ahead and break my door down, but there's more to it than that from a firefighting perspective and for the safety of the firefighters that are responding for the reasons that the chief cited. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would say they should go through the appeals process and have the appeals board make a decision based on all the facts and circumstances that exist with respect to their particular building, keeping in mind safety of the firefighters and weighing that against what the property owner desires. And I'm going to say, I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. I think a fire board of appeals who is experienced in fire science is going to err every time on the side of fire safety and firefighters, except in those situations where there is a proposed alternate method that satisfies the purpose.
I agree, and that's why I would prefer an opt-out method. Like TC said at the beginning, it'll be exceptional to have that someone doesn't have to do it, where I believe it's a matter of freedom, and with all due respect, and I guess it would be an unpopular opinion, but as a firefighter, part of the job is you're accepting, put my life on the line, it's what I do. I also believe it's and like I said, that's not like flippantly said at all, that as an American citizen, you're signed up for liberty. That's what this country is about, is freedom and liberty. And I believe that this is such a small thing that I don't believe is maybe even necessarily that big of a deal as a freedom infringement. But I believe historically, it's a small creep. It always is. And I believe if we hold the line now, you don't have to worry about, and it would be a separate thing for like residential. That's a building code, not an international fire code, but it is still able to bracket creep along. And I believe it to be a matter of liberty to give a private business owner in private property that respect.
From what I've heard all along, the biggest issue the business owners have is they don't want a key on the outside of the building. They want to be able to have the option to put a business card or a contact list in it. That's been the biggest concern I've heard. So for me, that's my biggest concern, is to make sure we address that to where the business owner has an option to put that key on the outside of the building.
So I don't want to make any assumptions for the board or for you. So if the code is adopted, we continue to require it just as it has been for the past 6-8 months or whatever it was, but they have the ability to appeal it and have that option, because they can argue that the key in the box or the key card in the box are both acceptable levels of protection. Does that mean that generally, sir, you would, I'm just trying to make
To me, it was there's no appeals board to put the key or the business card in it. It was they get the option as the business owner to put that business card in there. Okay, there is no option for the Knox box, but they have the option for the key or the business card. And from what I've heard, that's been the biggest hurdle. I don't want a key on the outside of my building, period. You know what I mean? Well, you have that option to put the key or a business card. You know, I think, you know, Craig is on, you know, the other spectrum of the box. He's, you know.
Well, I guess I feel like that completely changes your entire conversation. And it goes to like what Rick's saying of, okay, we're gonna say, okay, we'll do a phone number. Is nobody keeps, the best way to keep phone number and information is not buy a mini safe and bolt it to a building and put a business card in it. That makes no sense. So it would be like you're changing the conversation completely when we go to that, which says, okay, well, I'm fine with, let's have that conversation, but that means you're moving past the box completely just out of common sense. Because it doesn't make sense that's your route to store information.
Well, I mean, he's explained a few times why they don't have a system in place. For one, okay, they would have to require every fireman to have a cell phone, and we would have to cover the cost of it, because it's a tool.
Not necessarily. That'd be, if that's the route you took, then yes. But that's not necessarily.
But he said, though, there's not a system in place that, you know, they can utilize if they get a call to where there's not a key in there. Right? I mean,
So yeah, we don't have, nor does the county have a system in place that would accomplish that. That's correct. We had talked earlier, in earlier meetings about, well, why can't our smartphones can hold thousands of numbers? Why don't we just program all of our firefighters' smartphones with all of the business owners' numbers or contact information and keep that updated? And essentially, that's what you're alluding to. I think that if we require them to carry that database in their private or personal cell phones, number one, we've got a security issue or could be a perceived issue with that information. Number two, we would have the concern with asking our paid-on-call firefighters to maintain in their personal cell phones that database and then use it for that intent. So I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. We just don't have the ability or a good ability as we stand now to accomplish that, either at the county level or at the township level.
I think the other thing too is that the moment we start talking about any type of index or database, the liability all of a sudden swings back to whoever the holder of that database is. My position in this is twofold. I hear business owners who have been very vocal about they want an option. And from where I sit, I don't see that as untenable. I see it as doable. My bigger obligation is to the 32,000 residents in this community. And anything this board can do to ensure that liability isn't greater on this township, to me, is one of our biggest responsibilities. So by allowing this opt-out, we're achieving two goals. We're giving individual business owners the ability to say, I choose to participate. We obviously recommend a key. We think the key is the best answer. We think it's the most healthy. We think that we wish everybody would do that. But at the same time, you know, I often say that grown adults are grown adults and they make their decisions and they live with the consequences. And if a business owner says, I'm really not comfortable with the key, I want to put a phone number in the box, that business owner has passively said, come to my business and do what you got to do. That takes the liability, at least from my standpoint, and moves it off of this board, off of the fire department, and potentially shoves it back to the business owner. So to me, the moment we get into a database, now we're back responsible for managing phone numbers, and I guess this is going to sound harsh, but if business X doesn't update their phone number in the box, not my problem. That's business X owner's problem. If he needs to update the phone number, he needs to be contacting the fire inspector and say, hey, I need you to ride by. We got to put another list in the box. But ultimately, we as a board and as a township don't want to be the bearer and the repository of all this data that we're responsible for meeting out during the middle of an emergency. It just, unfortunately, it sounds in theory like, well, yeah, you just hit a cell phone button, it works. But when you go on scene during an emergency, it's not really that clear. It doesn't work that way. And particularly if you have multiple emergencies taking place in this county, Central Dispatch doesn't have the time. We're having to run our own incident command on scene. The incident commander's not going to have the time. You know, and without delving into that too much, it's just, it sounds good from an administrative perspective, but from a practical, institutional perspective, it's just not going to work.
I agree, which is why I suggest that the business owner, if they want to opt out, they sign a waiver that says, I assume all liability. I give full permission, I assume all liability.
Phil, did you want to finish what you were saying?
The only thing I would add is, in the mix of this, just don't lose sight of the fact that we have men and women who serve this township as firefighters whose lives are important. We provide them with air packs. We provide them with equipment. When they respond to an emergency, they do put their lives on the line. But having worked in my former life as a police officer for nearly 7 years, even though I put a bulletproof vest on, and even though I strapped a gun on, and even though I went in dangerous situations, I always felt in my heart that I was going to come home at night. So they'll go into those situations, they will put their life on the line, but give them the tools they need to return home to their families. That's important to me. So just don't lose sight of that.
Just so I'm clear, Chief, okay, if a business owner, you go out and you do your inspection and the business owner says, I don't want the box, I'm going to the appeals board, does the code allow for that?
Yes, and the code as it stands today, the 2015 code allows for that.
So they can appeal that
That's correct.
box entirely?
Any interpretation of the code by a fire code official can be appealed as part of the existing code today, as well as the same language exists in the 2018 code as far as that. So as we stand here today, it can be appealed, and there's an appeals process. And with the adoption of the 2018 code, this same process will exist. So that's correct. And that is, again,
But there's really not anything spelled on here that's going to give them the fire code really a way for them to opt out of the box.
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
From the way it's explained in here, there's really not a way for the fire advisory board or whatever the appeals board to give an opt-out option of that box.
That's not at all the case, I would say. I would argue that as the code stands today, because the adopted code, the 2015 code, has established a Board of Appeals and says that the Board of Appeals can rule on the adopted code and provisions, the interpretation and provisions of the code. Then the Board of Appeals, if a business owner that was required, so if a business owner was required last week to, as part of their routine annual inspection, the inspection report said you've got 30 days to install a key box per the code. They have every right, that business owner that was informed last week has every right to apply, and at that point, since we've never utilized a Board of Appeals, one would have to be formed by the board, but they would have every right as it stands today to go to the Board of Appeals and to plead their case based on the interpretation or application of the existing code. Is that fair, Mr. Goldsmith?
So with that in
Yes.
place, and then for me, with the option of the key or the business card, I'd be totally satisfied. And I don't know about the rest of the board, how you feel, but for me, all along, it's been mine. Mr. Steiner?
Well, and just be real careful. And I just want to point out, the one thing that it does state here, if somebody was to put phone numbers in the box, and it said, place contact information designated individuals in descending order who would respond to an emergency within 5 minutes of being contacted by the fire department. So that almost puts the fire department at a point of saying, oh, do I sit here and wait 5 minutes because they said they can get here? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, if it's the middle of the night, you just got woke up, I guarantee you 5 minutes will pass before you get in your car to get out your driveway, unless you're dressed and you're sleeping in your clothes and ready to go.
You couldn't get there in 5 minutes if you lived in a house next door at 3 in the morning.
That's what I'm saying. So that's something to be real, that would have to be addressed too then, because if the fire department, he's not going to sit here going, okay, I'm going to start counting. I just talked to him, I'm going to watch my clock, 5 minutes. Okay, now, do I bust the place down? Are they going to be here in 30 seconds more? Is it going to be 5, 10 minutes more?
Well, but at that point, though, if there's no signs of smoldering fire, there's no signs of, you know what I mean, anything major happening, I would think, you know, unless there's another call going on, they would wait, or they would bust. You know what I'm saying? I guess they would assess
And again,
the
that comes,
situation at that
that comes
point.
to the point, though, if it's something you can't physically see, looking through the windows and everything else, whereas if they had access, you weren't there in the 5 minutes, I can go in and I can search around through the building, and I just found a hot spot starting fire.
I don't think there's anybody on this board that disagrees. The best,
I'm saying, you
the
could-
best thing is to have a key in there for them to
Right,
go
but
access,
they
but
could say,
that's not what the
okay,
owners
5
want.
minutes went up, I don't see anything, let's walk away.
Yeah.
And
But they
then,
have to clear that building. That's part of the responsibility of the fire department. They have to clear the building.
so,
Mr. Supervisor, I think part of it is we as a board have to first figure out what direction we're headed, and then the specifics of that direction, to me at least, is a secondary conversation. But if it's the will of the board that we're not even going to consider that as an option, then there's no reason to sit around and talk about it for 30 minutes. But if that's going to be the direction the board takes, then all of a sudden the specifics, I think, become uber relevant.
Mr. Francis?
We've been shoveling a lot of smoke, so to speak, tonight about this. I, for the life of me, can't get it through my head why a thief that wants to break into your building is going to spend a half hour trying to break the box versus 10 seconds to break a window in the back of the building where nobody can see. These boxes have to be in the front so that the fire department could see them right away. It doesn't make any sense to me.
My concern is it works with the key. That's my concern, is that it works with the key. That a nation's own government needs to be its most feared thing that it is. That nothing's killed more people than their own governments. That's my concern, is the key works.
Well, do you feel the same way about speed limits? That people ought to be able to opt out of speed limits? Because it's infringing on their right to drive as fast as they want to drive?
That goes to, infringes on other people's liberty. And yeah.
Well, go ahead, Paul, finish your comment.
And Rick's comment, I like the idea of waiting till the technology gets there and then do that. I'm thinking that that would cost more money to implement a system and staff a system than it would cost us to buy all the boxes for the businesses. And that, it makes no sense. we need to wait for the technology to catch up, if it ever does, and then we'll, change the thinking then and maybe change the way we do business here. Why don't we ask our law firm to come up with a couple of alternatives? One, to have the opt-out required to be made, that decision to be made by the Board of Appeals. And
So do you
maybe
want-
another one to have it where the township could authorize that.
To be able to have a couple written-up options for us to look at and really go, okay, and then we can kind of make a
'Cause
motion, have something to motion
We need to
on.
move on this one
Yeah.
way or another, so we're not stuck in limbo here. Because it's important, and it's a safety issue. And I agree with everything that Phil said about the firefighters. We don't, as citizens, I don't think we realize the value of the fire department that we have right now. It's a tremendous value. They're a very efficient operation. They're getting better all the time. We've spent a lot of money buying equipment. Why do we do that? For the safety of the citizens. It's well-spent money to allow them to have that safety. This is just another one of those that we need to give them everything that we can possibly afford.
I would
For their
like to see one of the options be that the business owner has the option of the key or the business card or the contact list without the appeals board.
Well, that was my suggestion. You have it written both ways. One that requires the appeals board, the appeals, I guess, Board of Appeals, to make that decision and issue that. And the other one would be to not have to go to the appeal board to have the opt-out. Because that's what Craig was thinking, as I interpreted what he was saying, is he would rather not have
I
to.
don't know where Craig's at this point. I think
Well,
he's,
I kind of feel like that the letter we were given dated the 28th does exactly what you're saying, Paul.
Amen.
Both things are there. I feel like we're this
Got it
board,
here.
and I mean it absolutely respectfully, but it's truly a time to make a decision.
I agree.
We've talked about it, we've chatted about it, we've put the fire department in a bad situation. You know, they're catching a lot of flack largely because we've wanted to do our due diligence. Our legal firm has done that. They've given us a document that said, here are your choices. And it's now on us, I feel like, to make a decision. I'll go ahead and take the arrows on that, and I feel like we ought to adopt a policy whereby the business owner has the choice from the onset of a key or key holders in the box. And that the appeal process must also be in place because we have businesses, as the chief has said, that aren't going to fit and that we're not going to be able to allow a potential list of key holders because of the increased risk it poses to the areas of town that they're in and or our firefighters. So the appeals portion is important, but I think intellectually, I struggle with the idea that you have to go to the appeals process to exercise your choice. I think we're dancing around the issue of choice, and I think choice is significant enough here that, like I said, if grown adults want to make adult decisions about their business and choose not to have a service that's being afforded to them, that's up to them.
well, why don't you make that in the form of a motion?
Well, I don't think we can. We've never had, it's not listed that we could actually make a motion.
But we can direct him to make that.
We're supposed to be adopting this when we adopt the 2018 fire code. What's the point of
Exactly.
having the motion now for something that is unrelated when we adopt the 2018? You haven't heard discussion.
Yeah, I agree, Nancy, that, and it was one of the questions I asked earlier tonight, is it seems like to me this is going to be part and parcel of when the next approval comes to us. So I think if all we're doing at this point is relaying the intent that this is the path we want to go down, write it this way, so when we approve the 2018 fire code, this process is canonized in that.
Paul?
Am I interpreting your thought correctly if I say the only reason that someone would go to the appeals board is to not have a box?
No. I would think there'd be multiple reasons why someone
Well,
could go to
but
the
that's
appeal.
the only difference between them being able to opt out right from the get-go and say, they'll buy a box, but I don't want to put a key in it, I put a card in it.
No, there's also businesses that simply won't be allowed to opt out because of the category or the criteria.
I know that, but the main difference is box or not box.
From where I'm coming from, there's not even a question of box or no box. Box is it, it's part of the code. The question is, do you authorize the choice to put a key or key holders?
Okay, well, we need to move forward, so we need some direction to legal on what to do moving forward.
Agreed.
So Nancy, do you have a suggestion?
Would you just submit this letter that you've already written and submitted? It's got it all right in here, everything. Shame on us that we have never appointed a appeals board. It's been in there forever, it sounds like. And why didn't we ever appoint people to an appeals board? There's a lot of other things they'd appeal. I remember discussing this the last time this came up, and it had to do with putting sprinkler systems in homes. And I objected to that. But that's something that if we had the appeals board, the builders could have gone then and appealed that if they, for whatever reason. I'm not in construction. But
We have a construction board of appeals.
Construction Board of Appeals. This is not a construction board of appeals.
know,
This is
but
a
you
fire
just-
code board of appeals. Yeah, the construction board of appeals could not have overridden the fire code. That's my point.
Okay.
We need a board of appeals for this fire code, and, I mean, we fell down on the job there. It would already be in place. We should have had it a long time ago. But to me, this letter has it all. What we've all discussed and talked about doing.
Yeah. Nancy, the problem with this letter as written is it defines two possible paths. This board still has to decide which path is going to be put in the 2018 code.
Well, I thought we pretty much came to some assumption on that, but okay. If you know, I mean, we've talked for a long time, and pretty much everyone here has agreed, except for Craig. And, we rule by majority here, so Craig has his right to vote no. But I think that, go ahead, whatever. I think we've covered it all.
I agree.
Are we making a motion then for what the amendment would be? Is that what you're saying? Because it would need an amendment if you have an opt-out.
I don't think we're making a motion. I think as a board, we would simply tell Mr. Goldsmith that when he finalizes the 2018 fire code and it comes to us for approval, that the opt process is part of that section,
Is that
as
clear,
we've
Bill?
discussed for the last hour.
Right.
Yeah, we've been working with, Tom Graham and I have been working with Chief Massengill on not just this section, but the entire 2018 International Fire Code. And I think it's ready to come to the board, with the exception of Section 506. And I think I have been able to assimilate the discussion here tonight and to be able to draft 506 in the manner that the board would like to see it for its review and for the adoption of the entire 2018 code.
Okay.
So with your permission, I'll do that. And with your permission, I'll work with the chief.
Let's do that. Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I just
Ms.
have one
Taylor.
more question. In the Board of Appeals, are we able to appoint people outside of Bedford Township that would not have a bias one way or another? Can you appoint people other than your own community? Or if you don't know, would you look into that to see what kind of?
Yeah, we don't, if I remember correctly, we don't have some units of government have a policy to appoint the residents of the community. We don't have such a policy, to the best of my recollection. I don't think we do.
We don't. We've gone over this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so there's specific requirements, the chief will tell you, in the International Fire Code that says these board members will possess these requirements. So you may need to go outside of the community to get those requirements. That chief, engineering is one, fire science.
Yeah, like a fire protection engineer has to be one. I think someone that's a building engineer has to be. It's pretty specific to fill it in the same way that we fill the fire authority board. Wouldn't, where we take applications, and it wouldn't work in that way because They're very, very specific. Each of the positions are very specific on what's required to fill, so that it gives a broad spectrum of, not really the community, but of experts in different areas that can hopefully
I saw those
provide.
requirements, but I'm saying on some boards, by law, we have to have people that vote in this jurisdiction, on some boards. I didn't know if this board, I know it had specific qualities and training and whatever that you
Well,
have to have, but.
Let's let Phil look into it either way.
Yeah, we can do that, and I know the board, to the extent that it's possible, would like to fill those positions with residents from Bedford Township. We may be able to do that, but if we can't, I will make sure that we can go outside of our geographical limitation.
Chief, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, item 7B, request for approval to move forward with the roundabout project at Jackman and Smith Roads. Mr. Francis? Going from one to the next, huh?
We've talked about this issue several times. We struggled with it at the last meeting on some sort of a motion, and I just felt very uncomfortable in making a motion on the fly without considering. I spent a little time drafting a proposed motion. I'm going to hand you a copy right now. I thought it was going to be in the board packet, but I'll take the responsibility for not getting it in there somehow. It didn't make it. But it's just a simple motion to lay out where I think we are. We're not signing a contract with this. This is just, in effect, a motion that acknowledges and accepts the CMAQ grant that the Road Commission got on our behalf. And it also, we're accepting that grant contingent on the township's ability to purchase the property that's needed to make this project viable.
Which is still in the works.
Which is still in the works. You, at the last meeting, authorized a couple of us, Paul and myself, to talk with the realtor firm and make an offer. We did make a preliminary offer last week for about a third less than the asking price, maybe a little more than that. Hasn't been accepted yet because the attorneys for the other side were on vacation, which is fine. But it's a process, and all this motion says is, assuming we can purchase the property and demolish the building, that we're authorizing the township to move forward to work with the road commission to develop the project and share the costs over and above the grant on a 50-50 basis, limited to $175,000 for the road commission share and our share also.
And this is kind of what, the same thing Randy Pierce.
Basically, I worded it a little bit different, and we should read it. You don't have to read the numbers. The numbers are right off of Manick and Smith's estimate of the cost at this point. We haven't got any bids. This is just.
Why don't you just make it in the form of a motion, and then we can have discussion if need be.
Okay. You want me to read the motion, or?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Mhm.
Okay. Mr. Supervisor, I move that the Bedford Township Board acknowledge and accept with gratitude the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, or CMAQ, grant awarded in the amount of $597,000 for partial funding of the construction costs for the Roundabout road improvement project located at the intersection of Jackman and Smith Roads. In addition, I move that the Bedford Township authorize moving forward on the Roundabout project contingent on purchase and demolition of the property needed for the project and sharing the remaining project costs, excluding the water line relocation costs, with the Monroe County Road Commission on a 50-50 basis, not to exceed $175,000 for each party. The water line relocation costs, if any, and they're estimated to be $45,000, would be paid by the Bedford Township Water Fund. The numbers that we're using is the total estimated project costs is $977,000, which includes the water relocation. So I subtracted 45,000 from that to give a project cost for just the roundabout of 932,000, less the $597,000 CMAQ grant, brings the remaining cost to be shared between the road commission and the township at about $335,000.
Do I hear support?
I'll support.
Motion and supported by Mr. Montry. Discussion? Ms. Tinneberry?
I object to the phrase not to exceed $175,000 each because we are paying $220,000. I think it's misleading to imply, it doesn't matter what fund the money's coming out of. Bedford Township is contributing at least $220,000, so I object to the continued statement that we are only paying $175,000. And what about the Manick and Smith costs that we paid to do some survey or something, whatever they were doing?
We split that with the road commission, I think $3,500 apiece.
Okay, well, at $3,500, I mean, you know, it's not chump change, it's a lot of money, $3,500.
But that doesn't have to be in this motion, though.
It's money we're spending, we're misleading the public to let them think we're only spending $175,000 for a roundabout at Jackman and Smith.
If they don't bother to read the wording of the motion, they'll get that opinion.
It's what's
It very plainly
stated.
states in there that $45,000 is being paid from the water fund.
It doesn't matter what fund, we're paying $220,000, and it doesn't matter, they're not gonna read the motion. It's been stated over and over and over at this board meeting and other board meetings, so there's additional costs. Who's gonna pay the overage? I've rarely heard of a road project to this extent that hasn't come in over what has been estimated. Who's gonna pay the overage? This is a Monroe County Road Commission road roundabout. The state of Michigan has not, I mean, they got money to give away, so they're giving us, not us, they're giving it to the road commission. I don't understand how we're accepting with gratitude because they're not giving it to us, they're giving it to the road commission. The road commission is applying it to the project. It's...
Mr. Francis?
How about you write the next motion?
I
You
would
don't like anybody's wording but yourself, so you write one then.
excuse Mr. Francis, but I object to the whole project.
I have the floor.
You're a little insulting, thank you.
Okay, point of order. Come on, let's keep on task here. We got...
Nancy, we're friends, let's act like it. All this is for discussion only. If you don't want to adopt it, fine, don't.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Do you guys want to make a friendly amendment so it's on the record that it is the two, whatever Nancy said, 200 and, or the 175 plus 45 for the record? Or do you want to leave it as is?
I feel like it's in there.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and support. Any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
No, and I'd like my objection to be part of the record, please.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-1. And I'll keep the board updated with the property as I get
Maybe I
information.
should have made a friendly amendment that it's not the crew's last job like the Lewis Avenue project. That maybe.
No, I don't believe so. Okay. We don't control that, unfortunately. Okay. 7C, request for approval for Voss Lighting to install LED lights at the Bedford Library. Okay. You have the cost in front of you. What had happened originally was there wasn't a bid from years ago to replace these fixtures in the amount of $9,000. For some reason, that bid was handed to Voss from the library, and that's what ended up being out here, and we found out it was not correct. So this is the correct number to replace all the center pendant lighting throughout the center of the library to go LED in the amount of $1913. So it's to finish the project, the LED project. And as the budget meeting, you can see, you know, our savings is huge, so.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Voss Lighting quote to remove 27 existing plug-in CFL lamps and 9 fixtures and replace with 27 new Philips plug-in LED lamps. Remove the 9 existing ballasts and replace with 9 new Philips advanced ballasts for a total project cost of $1,913.82.
Second.
Okay, motion supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
Yeah, for discussion purposes, do we need to, because, I mean, we technically already approved this, correct? Like, was this not the thing that they had to fix, that Voss gave us a bad estimate again?
It wasn't Voss giving us a bad estimate. They took an original quote that the library had given them, or of what needed to be done, and it wasn't right.
Because didn't we have 3 quotes, though, that got approved a couple meetings ago? Isn't that what this is?
No, the ones previously were the parking lots and were some other fixtures, but we've not voted on this previously.
We haven't.
This wasn't that 800.
Yeah, because there was like 3 quotes, and it was like way less.
Yeah, but no, there was a quote to do the pendant lighting throughout the center, but it was about $9,000.
Because we had 3 quotes. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I believe I know what you're talking about,
And-
the $800 one that they came back and they said.
Yeah,
no,
they
that
came
was
back
per
and said,
light.
oh, we did it wrong, which is, I
Well,
think,
all I
what
can
they
tell you
did.
is this quote that we have right here is for the center pendant lightings that haven't been done yet, or ever been approved.
Nancy, was that when you were on the library board? Do you know what he's referring to?
I don't know what he's referring to. I know what the supervisor said. This is for those pendant lights that have not been done, that are going to save a lot of money by changing bulbs.
Greg, keep your mics close to your mouth so the public can hear.
Yeah, we haven't done this one.
No.
This is not the same.
You are right, but that was a bad quote, and we didn't approve it.
Well, we didn't approve it
That
when
was
there was like
before
the 3
Craig was
quotes?
on the board.
No, I think we approved something a couple meetings ago from the library, for the library. We had 3 quotes, and it was a no-brainer, whatever, but then I thought that this was something that, oh, we goofed up again, and that's why I guess the discussion was just, do we need to address Voss as a company of getting accurate quotes?
I will make sure, we're not going to be paying a bill twice, we're not getting charged twice, we're going to be paying the $1,900 to replace the pendant lightings. So,
Right.
there was some mistakes that had happened, but,
Oh, yeah, way.
you know, but I can tell you this,
Yeah.
at the end of the deal, we've come out looking real good.
Yeah, and this isn't a redundant bill. This is a new work, new quote to finish it up.
Right.
So we've not covered this ground before.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Moving on to new business, item 8A, request for approval of voucher for payment. Ms. Herzberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $28,036.05. Fire District, $17,185.73. Police Fund, $847.59. Park Fund, $13,296.40. Transit System Fund, $19,323. Library Fund, $4,538.89. Water Revenue Fund, $2,600. Indian Acres SAD, $2,250.73. Mohawk Trails SAD, $83,924.15. Mildred Drive SAD, $112,335.20. Downtown Development Authority, $36,800. Sewer O&M Fund, $1,412,805.72. Trust and Agency Fund, $4,027. for a grand total of $1,737,970.46.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Mr. Francis?
Just a brief explanation of why the sewer O&M fund is $1.4 million. It includes two big items. One is the bi-monthly operating costs paid to the Drain Commission. It's $408,317 every 2 months. The large item in there is the first payment on the sewer plant upgrade of $1 million. The construction contractor is way ahead of schedule, so this came a little earlier than we thought it would. We had funds invested in CDs and the like that we had to cash early because we needed the money earlier because he went so fast. But it was originally thought that that was going to be about a 3-year project. Now it's probably going to be a 2-year project, which is great. But that's the reason that expenditure is so high. There's two big items in it.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Richburger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, discussion on bidding out various Bedford Township contracts. Ms. Tinnevery?
I remember that we had discussed in the past possibly bidding out contracts, keeping them updated, keeping the ability for other companies and services to place a bid, and keeping us on our toes, knowing that we're doing the best in spending our taxpayer dollars. There are several on here, as you see, that are yearly, some that automatically renew. I'm not so sure about the automatic renewal from my perspective. I think there's things that we should look at least every couple years. And some of them I was surprised. I don't understand what drinking water for township is. Is there something wrong with our water?
We just have a Culligan water.
I know,
out
is there
there.
something wrong with the tap water?
No, but there has been in the past, and so,
Like what? I don't remember. That come to the board that there was something wrong with the tap water? I don't remember that.
That also includes Culligan at the Samaria Park facility, also inside, where there
Okay.
is a problem with the water.
Right, I understand that. I just didn't think, it says township, so,
yeah, there's one at the township.
was that approved by the board?
No.
Okay. The IT right, about halfway down the page, IT services is IT right. I may be the only one, but I've had problems with my remote email for months. A lot of spam. They called, I talked to the fella, we're on a system that says trustees, so maybe some of my fellow trustees accept some of this spam, and because they accept the spam, then I continue to get the spam. I put unsubscribe almost every time, and it doesn't work. It doesn't, and so I asked the fellow that called, and he said that's possibly what's happening. So I don't know why we can't have our own email, our own. ntinvery@bedfordmi.org is what my email is. It doesn't say trustee@bedfordmi.org, but we're hooked up to a trustee thing, so. I don't like the spam. My box is full. I'm constantly having to go through, and I get lots of email from residents. I have inadvertently deleted email from residents because it comes right after the spam. So I'm interested in, as a trustee, bidding out the IT services again. I'd like to see something local where I can just call somebody local and get things taken care of quickly. Also, the auditing service, I know that there was a option on there for year 2019 and 2020, but I didn't think we approved that. I thought we approved the 1 year. I wasn't happy with this year's audit. I called the woman, you were all aware of the back and forth conversation we had.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled with that either.
She wasn't willing to discuss anything about the finances of the township with a trustee. Well, excuse me, then I don't think she understands township government very well, because a statutory duty of a trustee is to be responsible for the finances and the funding of the township. But she was basically rude in terms of she wasn't about to speak to me about anything because I was a trustee. To me, that's unacceptable. Well, anyway, the point is, I wanted to have the board look at the different contracts. There are some that I, as a board member, would not want to bid out. One is the attorneys, because I think that there is a responsibility of this board to maintain the history of knowing that these attorneys have done our business for many years. They understand the background of many things, and so there are certain ones that I would not consider putting them out for bid.
You just don't want to use them at all.
I don't want to use them, but unless we really need them, but I don't want to get new ones because they got all the history. You know, something like the engineering. I mean, we don't have an ongoing project, so I don't know why we need an engineering firm, but I think that we should bid out some of the separate projects and not use just one monopoly firm. But that's why I wanted to have it on the agenda, so we could look at the contracts.
Rick had his hand up. At Culligan Water, we did have algae bloom, where we couldn't drink the water for days at one point in time, and this is a cheap way to have a second water source within the building you can drink. So it's if
cheap?
we want to get, yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Cheaper than just drinking the good old South
Okay,
County
and
water.
I do agree, we do need to bid out some of these other things we talked about on a yearly basis. I was not impressed with the auditing lady, that she would talk to you like that at a meeting after just getting a bid. I was not impressed at all. But a lot of these other ones, Stevens Disposal, we just negotiated with them. They cut off all the fuel charges. You know, they worked a great deal with Trudy and I.
Could you say that?
Stevens Disposal.
Oh, the garbage
They
pickup?
cut off a huge chunk of the fueling cost in order to renew that. They are.
So that's not something that the board needs to approve?
Well, it was an automatic renewal. It's been an automatic renewal since how long, Trudy?
Years. I
You
can't
probably
tell
put
you
that
how
in place
long.
back in the 80s.
Yeah, you signed one of them.
Back when you said you were, that's when you were
When I was here-
young and dumb.
When I was here in my teenage years, I do believe that that was important. No, I'm not, I don't
But
believe
before we
it's
let it
automatic
automatically
renewal.
renewal, they cut a lot of the fuel cost off. It was more than a 15% savings, I think. And they're the only local company. Let me go through this list here. Habitat Security, we're constantly working with them. I mean, we just saved $100 a month at the library for the monitoring of the cameras. Cleaning service, that's something that we were just at our budgeting meeting. I told them they need to look at putting out for bid to stay competitive. So, I mean, the Library Advisory Board should be working on that in the future. Engineering, we do constantly have projects. I couldn't tell you when we don't have a project. And we did bid that out, how many years ago, the engineering services?
We have road projects, we don't have construction projects. What are we constructing?
Well, I mean, we're not constructing anything at the moment, but I'm saying, though, we constantly have road projects going on that they're involved with. Paul, I'm sure, well, I mean, there's other things, too.
The park board almost always has
Yeah, the
something.
DDA,
in
the
pipeline.
DDA uses
DDA
them,
is
you know.
quite active as well.
But they're a company, I mean, personally, I'm extremely happy with them. They won the lowest bid when we did bid it out. When was that, Trudy, 4 or 5 years ago?
Oh, it was back in 12.
Back
Yeah,
in
it was
12,
just-
so I mean, let's put it out for bid. I'm not opposed to put it out for bid again, because I think Manica Smith will probably end up winning it. George Welling, we really need to discuss that. No, I'm just kidding, George. I'm just kidding, George.
Mr. Chairman?
Paul? Oh, actually, Mr. Steiner was up next, sorry.
Just a quick one on the, Ms. Tinbury mentioned the email issues and we do all have individual email addresses that anybody can send us emails to. There was one that was trustees@bedfordmi.org, even before IT Right took over, was part of a problem with gaining spam and junk and all that, that we were told then that that email address was going to be discontinued. Now, if it got back on there, maybe we should consider taking that one back off again. Because
Not that I'm aware of, but I can look at that.
because that's where a lot of
to make-
spammers
It's on
seem
there.
to hit when it's generic. And the reason that it doesn't work when you hit junk, Nancy, and put it to junk, is they have these systems that automatically recreate and it reconfigures. They might just put a little dot or a hyphen or a little space or
We don't
something.
recognize it, huh?
So it looks like a brand-new email address and it shoots it back to you again with the same garbage. I mean, I notice a difference. If I open my personal email on my home computer with Outlook, a lot of stuff goes to junk and spam. If I open my Buckeye by webmail, it's all in my inbox. And I have to move it manually out of there into my junk. So, and you're probably accessing via webmail, which, and I don't know from an Outlook standpoint, maybe the gentleman from IT Right can answer that. If we're accessing it via webmail, maybe again, it doesn't clean out as much as if it's on an Outlook on a computer. Now, the other one I find is your smartphones don't do the same things when you open your email on those. I find junk in my inbox in there, but maybe if I go to the webmail, it's not in the inbox. Yeah, it's just, each operating system filters things out differently, and it's a real pain when you've got multiple operating systems.
Nancy, are you getting like, because Craig and I were just talking about, I get like 2 a week and they clearly say email quarantine. I mean, it's really obvious
Yep,
it's
we get
spam.
those too.
But like maybe 2 a week tops. I'm not getting, he's not getting a lot. Rick, are you getting a lot?
I get them. I mean, I'll look right now. Let me tell you what I'm sitting at right this second.
Because it
Well,
may
I
be
got
something
one
that
from
the
Al,
individual
that's
email
junk mail.
account needs to be looked at.
They looked at it.
Yeah, once, I've only got a couple in here, and there's one of them, it happens to be from a real person, but I believe it's because his emails have hackers that have gotten into there, because I get junk all the time from him.
Yeah, not that it's not a problem, but I just wanted to let you know, it's, I'm not seeing that
not
same
drastic.
thing. So I don't know how the problem exists, but if you guys want to tighten it up, I'm on board. But I haven't seen a big number of them
I
come
get them
through.
in the morning. They come overnight.
Huh.
You talking about Chiefs?
What?
I'm just.
So
No, it's not, it's something men would apply to, and I don't care to look at it.
So I think, and as I mentioned, gentleman from IT Right was shaking his head yes about when I said the trustees at bedfordmi.org being a generic. I mean, I think if Trudy's gonna look into that, maybe we just remove that one.
Nancy, you need to give us some directions on which one we want to put out for bid, and we'll move forward with it. So it's
Well, it's not just
engineering.
me, I
Well, I
mean,
know,
the
but
whole board.
you put it on the agenda. Engineering, okay, IT services, we've got auditing services. Are those some of the ones you're talking about?
Yes.
I just want to say that IT Right has been the best IT service company we've had here since I've been here. I have not had problems with them. I've talked to other employees about them. Their price was remarkably lower.
I've
I
called
just
them.
wanna
Yeah,
put that out
I haven't
there.
experienced
I
near
would
the
have-
downtime that I had with the previous provider.
I have not had a problem. I called, it's fixed that day.
I called
don't
once
even have
and
to wait.
they took the call real time and fixed it, and that was it. So,
I guess I don't understand why, even all these other ones that say auto renew yearly, I mean, how do you get, you can't tell me that people don't increase their cost of doing business. And so, you know, how do you know that, you know, if you just automatically renew all these different ones, you never know if there's somebody else out there that
Like
could provide a
BDC
good-
comes before our board.
What?
BDC comes before our board. They're auto-renewed, but their bill comes before our board, so we would know if it was increased.
BDC,
Economic
where's
Development
that?
Services, Monroe County Business Development Corporation.
Oh. I don't know that there's anybody that can do that. I
And-
mean, there's
and-
not, that's not just something that,
And
there's a lot of people out there.
Pasco Cleaning Services, I mean, our cleaning service at Township Hall, I mean, if that's auto-renewed, she's been doing it, I don't know, since what, the 70s?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's something we want to put, you know,
IT
I
rate.
just brought it
renewed at the
up.
same
If
price.
if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. It's just my
There's a
opinion
few
that
of them that
I don't think we should have auto-renew. We have people in the community that, you know, do these kinds of things, and I just think that they should have an option or a chance to bid on them. I mean, Monroe Conservation District, that's not something you can put out for bid. I mean, that's not the kind of contract I was looking for, but I see why. I mean, it is a contract.
I'm just saying, in order to do it, like for auditing, it's a big deal. To put it out for bid, it's a lot of work to go through. We've seen what we went through last year, but we need some direction. Somebody's got to steer it and say, hey, this is the direction we want to go. Let's put it out for bid. And then you've got to go through all the process of doing it. So, you know, same thing with IT services. That's the route we want to go. It took us, last time we did it, 6 months
Yeah,
to
that's
get it done.
huge.
So it's a big deal. So I'm just saying it's, which we're probably ahead of the game because we already have written up what we want written up. Same thing with our auditing. It should be a lot quicker.
One of the things that's tough when you have the cleaning services and some of these other ones that are auto renews. The cleaning services, you can look at our budget information as anybody can get it from the public standpoint, and they say, oh, I know exactly what to pay. I can undercut that one. I can undercut that one by a couple bucks. I can get the business. Other ones, like, you know, Manick and Smith, you know, that one, you know, again, that's contingent upon the different types of work, plus some of it's standardized, but everything else they do has to be done as an individual project. But there's certain things in here that anybody can glean that information if they're gonna try to bid against somebody.
Well, to move the meeting forward, if anybody has something that they want to put out for bid that's on this list, shoot me an email and we'll move forward with it. Mr. Francis?
I think that's a good idea. I think Nancy's request for a list was a very good idea.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to keep 18 or however many of these contract engagements that we are in without a list. I think it's a good idea to have that list.
So if you want something bid out, let's just move forward.
Just
Mr.
one more
Steiner?
thing, who's got this electronically? This information?
I do.
And I don't want to try to put work on somebody, but it would be much easier to see this if we saw, here's the date it took effect, here's the expiration date, here's when we have to renegotiate by, and here's when we have to sign it by. So you can read straight across. Look straight down the
But
dates.
you're going to add work.
Send it to me. I mean, once you put that out there one time,
No, this was just a quick, so
Yeah.
we had
right, but I'm just saying.
something in front of us.
If you want to send it to me with that, I'll take a stab at it and,
Oh, we'd have to dig each one back out and see when it takes effect, when it ends. This is just quickly what we put together.
well, I think the majority of this stuff, though, we could pretty much tell.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Montry?
Yeah, I want to keep moving too. I just wanted to say I agree, auto renewal, look at it and reset it. I just put, counting out minus the attorneys, you have 24. If you could, through the next year, like reset these, that you have your ending date on, like through each month or whatever, you could look at one a month, or one a meeting pretty much for, okay, that's gonna need to be renewed next month, do it in that month before. And then I just had a question for the Monroe Conservation District, and that can probably be addressed after the meeting, even if that is something that needs to be utilized for the situation on like Lewis Avenue. Is that anything? I don't even know, like, just management of soil,
Connie
water.
Veliquit comes here every year, and
You know what I'm talking about, like with the laundromat? like with that issue, if that's something that,
No,
anything at all.
It's basically for
Okay.
farmers and farming.
Okay.
And it's just a contribution, more than it is a contract, contribution for us to assist them in their revenue.
And then for like the cleaning services, I think we said that in the budget meeting of like getting that, having that part bid out already, so. Good.
All right, moving forward, well, if anybody has any thoughts, just email us. Okay, item 8C, request to adopt 9 deficit elimination plans. Ms. Hirschberger?
We've been doing these every year for our SADs because we pay the money out and we have to wait for the money to come back. We have to do one every year for each one of the SADs. The exception this year is we have one for the library because until we knew their millage was going to pass, they were going in a deficit. So there is a little bit that we're going to have to send to the state to show that we have a deficit elimination plan, which is they have a millage. They won't be in a deficit. So if there's no questions, I'll just start making motions. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Chapel Creek subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that the resolution to approve Wild Haven Park subdivision deficit elimination plan be approved as presented.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Indian Acres subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Sandywell subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Mohawk Trail subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for the library deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Giant Oak subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Springbrook subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion supported. Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
And last, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for Mildred Drive subdivision deficit elimination plan as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion?
Yes. We probably should have explained what do these deficit elimination plans do. All it does is state, this is the amount of money that we have invested on behalf of the SAD districts, and they're all going to be paid back over time. And that's what this deficit elimination plan is. It shows by year until it's all paid off. That's all it does. It's not cost the township anything. We're just a conduit for it. That's all this does.
Ms. Tinneberry?
I understand the SADs because they're after you collect taxes, but we passed a millage for the library. Is that because that money hasn't come in, it won't be on there next year, or what?
Well, they had a deficit at the end of June. The millage didn't pass till after that. So at the end of June, the audit report shows a deficit in the library. And we just eliminated that by collecting the millage in the next year, so it eliminated that deficit. So we're good. But whatever fund has a deficit at the end of the fiscal year needs to show up on this list.
Okay, could you call the roll,
It
please?
was a small deficit, but it'll be in the positive as soon as that millage
That's what I
funding.
thought, yeah.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clement?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8D, request for approval to contract George Welling to video record the 2019 budget meetings. Mr. Montry?
Okay, so this is brought to me by the public of video recording our budget meetings. My understanding was that that was already part of that contract, that the contract included having the budget meetings recorded. If that is not the case, and that's going to be, and by my reading of the contract, I don't see it necessarily written out one way or the other.
Well, and I agree. I watched the video of the budget meeting, and I kind of took it as, we don't want to take advantage of George of having him at every flipping function in the whole county, but it was pretty clear that if we needed him for something, he was able to be there, and I don't think we overstep our.
Oops, sorry.
Overstep.
Don't throw stuff.
You dropped your
Mr.
wallet.
Clements?
No, I guess my question is it's being Facebook Live. Why do we need to redundant videotape it? To me, if we're going to allocate those hours and we're going to be sensitive to using George in other areas, I would think that the town hall meetings that we were having before this meeting, and there's some other areas that I think are more relevant to the public at large. And it's not as if we're not videotaping the budget. We are. It's just done via Facebook Live, at which time it's then recorded permanently.
I gotta be honest, I really don't want to Facebook Live the videos, the meetings. I have done it. People complain to me, they can't hear it. And I don't personally want to have to worry about Facebook Live. I mean, if George can do it, I think it'd be more of on a professional level. People could hear him. You know what I mean?
And I'm kind of on both sides of the fence with that, is like, I thought you could hear that last meeting fine. I thought it was clear, and if you don't have to, I'm with you though, that it's fine to me either way. I thought it made more sense. I guess my purpose was that it's not a certain individual being required, like from the board being required to, okay, that's who's doing this recording. I don't think a redundant, that makes no sense. I'm not for that. I'm for one way or the other, but if that's part of the contract, I would think that you would utilize that contract. If we would look at it and say, no, that's kind of like what you're saying, that's taking advantage of Mr. Welling, then I would like rescind and say,
my
let's
thought process,
do it in the
we have
phone, it's fine.
administrators for the township Facebook page. Any one of those administrators could videotape it. That's where it should go. It doesn't need to go to somebody's personal page. It should be on the township page. And then anybody can access it. And to me, it's just an example. I'm all for if somebody wants to sit there and watch it. I don't have a problem with that. I just, when it comes to managing resources, think this is a classic case where why do it twice when we can save that resource for one way or the other?
And that's, I'll continue doing it, recording it if we don't pass this, but. Mr. Steiner?
Yeah, and one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember the exact hours, but the contract with Mr. Welling does state a number of hours. And he's already hitting and exceeding those hours based on a lot of things he's doing for the township. So for him to have to come in, he'd be almost having to be doing it on his own time unless we approved additional charges to do this.
Do we know how many hours he's hitting right now? Outside
In
of,
the contract, it's written as a minimum. Like, that's how the contract is written up, as a minimum, if I remember correctly.
Right,
That it was
so,
like,
but it says the minimum,
your-
and if he puts in that minimum, he could say, I met the minimum, I'm done. So, you know, without a cap on both sides of it. I mean, just look at the presentation that we had a couple meetings ago from George, and how, what did he say, was it 4,000 pages or something like that, or pictures he went through and people went through? I mean, I can only imagine the number of hours, plus the post-editing. George actually described to me how much work actually goes into, if that meeting there, it's not the same as doing this taping here. By the time he, and I don't know that part of the technology side, but does the conversions and everything else, I mean, that 2-hour budget meeting could turn into 6 hours of work for George overall, by the time you're done. So those kind of things, again, I think it's good if it's up on Facebook. The one thing that you talk about the sound, George's videos is definitely going to be better. The sound may or may not be better because we also don't have microphones at that meeting. So you're still sitting around a big room where you're going to have more echoes coming up and things like that. So,
Ms. Tinderberry?
Well, is that the reason? Because we meet over there? Why can't we just meet here and turn this on?
I don't see why we can't.
Well, I mean, that seems silly to
I personally like
face.
the face-to-face, being able to, I don't like this.
Well, I don't like it either, but I don't like paying extra for something that, you know, I mean, we don't even, how can we approve it tonight? We don't even have a cost. There's nothing
Well,
here.
we could still continue to Facebook, and it's free, and just put it on our Facebook page.
and I guess that's why I brought it to the board, I wasn't on the board that, like, approved that. It was just brought to me of, is this being done? And it was my understanding that that was the purpose of
George,
having that, of having that contract. But again, that's what I'm saying. That was my understanding. I wasn't part of that decision, so I'm kind of more asking.
George, can you come out here, please?
What you guys thought, and then, like I said, I'm fine with either way. It was more of the question.
What is the township YouTube channel? I didn't know we had a channel.
Oh, you did too.
I didn't
Come on,
know.
Nancy.
It's only our meetings.
I never watch YouTube. I didn't know we had a YouTube channel. What channel is it?
George will tell us. Now, George, do you feel like you're where are you at with your hours? Are you hitting your minimums every week? I mean, we don't want to take advantage of
A
you.
good
Yeah,
example.
for sure.
The video that I just did for the Bedford video, that took up 15% of the time of a year. Okay? And I wish I'd have been more prepared for this one, but I spent days getting permission to use different parts on that video.
But outside of that video, I mean, just your regular thing that you're doing. With what we
I
got
have
going
the meetings, and I go to the commission. I have a lot of administrative things, believe it or not, regarding trying to get the music, because any music we have to be very careful, you know, and a lot of research and a lot of digging going through that. I spend a lot of time on repair or working with the provider with DSI and that type of thing up in Canada, because if we have problems, I have to get those fixed, and that's why I do.
Go to Canada?
Boy, I'd love to do that, but
Set up in Canada.
yeah, no, Saskatoon at this time of year is just no. That's where the DSI computer comes from. That's the one that has the pages that change. You know, on the government channel. Have you looked at
Government channel.
on the government channel? Okay.
What are you talking about, cable?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, heavens, no.
Okay. Well, sorry.
Take the cable and dump it.
Paul, are you fine with doing the phone? I'll remove my, like I said, that's the reason I brought it, was my understanding of, I just wanted to have it done, and I thought, if that's what our contract is for, why would we do it different? But if that's not the contract, I can, I'll remove the
I will say,
request.
go ahead. Verbally, when I first presented this, we were talking about the 5 or 6 meetings to do now. Planning, BZA, and board. And sometimes planning has 3, sometimes they don't. And that was the big key thing, because all we ever did that, before that, was the township board meetings. And we did that for 18, 19 years now. And we wanted to make an improvement in our presentation, and we want to be able to cover more meetings like we have. And if we've also produced that video, we've done the video for the fire department, we've done the one about the human trafficking, and
Oh, he was doing our town halls, which we're going to spark
yeah,
that
the town
back up.
halls, I just took that upon myself to go ahead and do that with you anyway.
No, we're,
You know.
no, we're good, George. I'll just keep doing the Facebook.
So,
Fine.
wait a minute, do you have a charge for this?
75 an hour.
I was gonna say 75 an hour. And that was gonna be, if I may, just briefly, that would be for just shooting it. I still have other hours to transfer it over to MB4, so I could put it over to Facebook or put it over to YouTube, but that I was gonna consider part of my other hours. It's the fact that I am scheduled to do something, and that's what maybe say is 75, and talking to Trudy. And I would also like to let people know that I don't mind an email from you, Craig, but make sure that Trudy's aware, because she's the one I report to.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, last thing I just wanted to say is I particularly appreciate that the BZA and planning are, because it used to be impossible to try to make those meetings.
Oh, yeah.
But to be able to watch them and stay plugged in on the progress of some of those things, I think is a really valuable tool as a trustee. So,
And I will say, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because like when I'm not even thinking about it, subscribe to it. I'll
What
give you,
is-
we'll
what
talk
number?
about
What
it.
We're sending it, we're sending you emails about it.
Go on our website, it's right on the front.
I sent you an
Yeah, just go to the
invitation 4
website.
times, but you keep deleting it as spam, so.
I believe
Just go to the website and it says YouTube channel, then you hit subscribe, and it'll notify you every time there's a meeting.
Is there bad things on the YouTube channel? Because I don't go.
There's
to any
bad things
channel
everywhere, Ms.
that is-
Tanberry.
No, not in my home.
Anything
There
you
All right,
do
let's
that
move
has
forward. Here we go.
all pay for.
Item 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes.
Good evening again, Logan Tisdale. Last year, this township paid $741,197.73 to the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. Of that, $16,185.32 was part of that for 243.75 hours of overtime. There was a 3% administration cost, which came out to $27,855.63. If you look at the breakdown of the fines, which I gave you, this is what I'm going to say tonight. This year-to-date report shows breakdown of fines due to cities, townships, and villages for 2018. No state police citations would be listed on this breakdown since they write citations under state law and their fines go to the state library fund. All fines from traffic citations written under state law go to the state library fund. This is my understanding. Townships can adopt state law into their ordinances, causing traffic citations written under ordinances to generate traffic citation fine monies for those jurisdictions. There are 7 townships on this yearly breakdown with no fine money for the year. There are 2 villages with no fine money either. There are 2 townships where there was $57.75 and $28.05 in fine money generated. Could the Monroe County Sheriff's Department have issued traffic citations in these 7 townships? The answer is absolutely yes, if they wrote the citations under state law. If those jurisdictions adopted state law as part of their ordinances, then the only way the Monroe County Sheriff's Department could have written any citations is under state law. Otherwise, there would be some monies from fines. Indication is that no traffic citations were written under any ordinances. Did these 7 townships adopt state law as part of their ordinances? I don't know the answer to that question. What does this all mean, and is there any significance to us in Bedford Township? All I can say is that look at the jurisdictions with their own police departments and compare them to Bedford Township. Remember, to be fair to the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, some of these fines, monies in these jurisdictions with their own police department could have been generated by the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. How much, I don't know. I think we're missing out significant monies because the Monroe County Sheriff's Department writes extremely few traffic citations in this township, even though they patrol this township for thousands of hours without any citations being issued. Traffic citations should not be written to generate revenue. I would never endorse that type of police activity or mentality. However, doing nothing is also something I would never endorse under the guise of community policing. Real police officers enforce the law, both traffic and criminal. They do it because it is their sworn duty to protect the citizens they serve. They do it with the hope of saving lives and not as a vindictive action. They do it hopefully within the confines of the law, spirit of the law, and not as mindless, non-compassionate robots. The lawmakers had an intent when they wrote the laws. I foolishly thought as a police officer that writing a traffic citation for 1 mile over this traffic law or speed limit was not the intent of lawmakers. I tried to exercise compassion with traffic enforcement without giving away the farm in the process. Turning a blind eye to serious traffic violations is not compassionate, it is negligent. It puts people's lives at stake. Never in my career did I write a traffic citation to generate money. If this township receives monies because police officers go out there and do their jobs with dignity and professionalism, then there's nothing wrong with that. There should never be anything in a contract that mandates traffic citation quotas, but there should be a reasonable level of expectations that police officers will do their jobs. You can look at this report and come out with your own idea of what's going on here in Bedford Township. To me, I think it's important that we look at that. And we question why they don't write more citations here in this township when other police departments can go out there, write citations, which generates money, which is nothing wrong with that, because that's the byproduct of traffic enforcement. And so I would hope that you would consider this when anybody from the Sheriff's Department comes here and that you question them about this and show them these statistics. My guess is many of you people on the board never see this. I got this through the Freedom of Information Act. My guess is you very rarely see this. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention tonight so that you have some idea what that is. I'm not going to repeat the numbers. The public can get that the same way I got it through the Freedom of Information Act. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Paul Trinka, 7997 Victory Street, Vicksburg, Michigan, on behalf of IT Right. I would like to address some of the concerns you have with your email, and Mr. Steiner was exactly right. There's some things that we can do, and we can look at some generic names, and I think the clerk and I and the people at staff can do that pretty quickly and kind of filter that out a little bit. The other thing is you have a contract for web filtering, and that's what those Barracuda emails are that you get now, and it will, what Barracuda does is it takes the absolute bad emails, which makes me a little suspect, not of what you're saying, but how those are getting through to you. And so we need to check your email and verify that those settings are okay. And then from there, we can also ratchet it down. That's one thing. The other is if the township does decide to go out to bid, I would ask that IT Right have the opportunity to bid on the contract again. I think we've had a very good relationship for the last couple of years, and we would like to continue it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Hi, my name is Jewel Patton. My address 1612 Huntcliffe Court.
Just pull the microphone up. There you go.
Is that good? Okay, I had an issue yesterday. I was here for a meeting, a committee meeting. And while I was here, we were in that office next to Trudy's office with the glass door. While we're in this meeting, this lady goes into Trudy's office and she's looking through these files. So I sent an email to the trustees today. Somebody on our committee took a picture of the lady and I sent an email in the picture to the trustees today. I got an answer back from Nancy and TC. TC forwarded on to Trudy. Trudy sent me back an email. Could I read this? It says, Jewel, I looked into your email concerns sent to the trustees, and I found out from Angie in my department she was helping this resident in our office. The resident was looking at her requested FOIAs. She was not rifling through any of the township files, just the paperwork Angie had given her. She also had some Adopt-A-Road papers that she handed Angie from her own file of papers she had brought with her. Since I allowed your group to use my conference room, Angie took the resident to our counter to discuss her FOIA and other information. This is how we treat any resident that asks to speak with us away from the counter when the conference room is not available. I guess I just want to know, is that true? Does people from the public just march into these private offices? And my other thing is, if this conference room is where that takes place, is there another room where I can meet with our committees so we don't have those people marching in those offices?
Yeah, there is. I could talk to you about it after the meeting, but there is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments from the public?
Dale Track, 2842 Sanibel Lane. Just a couple of questions for the board. I'm not sure, this might more apply to the chief. Why particularly is the Knox box the preferred box? Are there other boxes available at a better cost to these businesses? And if so, is there group pricing available for these business owners as well? And I'd like to compliment Mr. Steiner on his comment about the Honeywell system. I think that could be an effective system for the opt-out option. Everybody could, just like if schools closed or something like that, if there's an emergency at the schools, it'd get broadcast out to everybody. The alert could go out, okay, XYZ building has got an issue. It would go out to everybody, but they would know it was an XYZ building though. And those people could respond to the chief in a timely way. So that's something I think that's worth pursuing for the business owners. And another thing going towards the videotaping of the meetings, the presentation back in May of 17 led me to believe that, like with these board meetings, that some of the information that you're looking at, the people at home could be looking at, from the equipment that you purchased, that they could be looking at particular things that might not be online that they pull up that's in the agenda. So just something that, reviewing that meeting, it was like, okay, here are these reports, we could put them up on the screen. That was the idea of going through with the budget meetings, because people would get a chance to see what your mindset is. You know, it's not just the transparency, it goes into the hard decision-making of why are we making these decisions to allocate funds this way as opposed to that way. And like I had touched on earlier, it's an educational tool too as well. You know, people get a chance to see the extra hours that you're putting in and and the legacy that you're leaving them as well. Not to mention the fact, the education part right there, for future board members. This is what you're going to have to do in order to make the job work, to make the township work. So that's one of the ideas behind recording these meetings. People get a chance that might not be able to make it here physically, but like TC touched on earlier, being able to see those meetings, you know, you're able to stay in touch with what's going on. So people have busy schedules, and those are points that you may not have considered, maybe you have, but something worth thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Bob? No? Okay, moving on to Board Commissioner. Ms. Dinnerberry?
It's adjournment time.
I want to respond, so I'll extend it.
Okay, so let's make do I hear a motion to extend the meeting?
A motion to extend the meeting just to hear from politicians? Are you kidding me?
Yes, because I want
People wanna
to
hear.
at least address some of the answers of the questions we were asked.
I make a motion to extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
Support.
Okay, motion supported. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clement?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
No.
Mr. Francis?
No.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
You lose.
Aye, the motion passed. 5-2. Okay, Ms. Tenenberry.
I have nothing.
Okay, Mr. Steiner.
Nothing.
Ooh, Mr. Francis.
Nothing.
Isn't it interesting that people have nothing to say it so well?
You're not allowed to, you said no.
We've done a lot of smoke shoveling here tonight. I mentioned that earlier. But it was worthwhile. That's a difficult issue. That fire code is this thick. I haven't read it. I haven't had the time to read it. I trust our chief to do that. That's his bailiwick, and he's doing an excellent job. We do need to get that issue resolved because we represent the people of the township, not the people that wrote the code. But I do think it's an appropriate thing for us to utilize that code as long as we have a provision that we discussed for them to make an appeal to it, and that an appeal board consisting of people with your credentials to make those kinds of decisions would make those decisions for us. That's all I got.
Okay, Mr. Clements?
The only thing I wanted to say is during the contracts, we were talking about review. You know I don't praise a lot, but you have done an exceptional job of going through a lot of those contracts and reducing them. So I think some credit is due there to say thank you for watching those dollars on some of those. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Montry?
I did speak with Sergeant Pauly, and we agreed to have him come to the next meeting and answer questions and address any issues the board may have, whether it's community policing or their hours. I would also, and I don't think that that's necessarily like contradictory, but I think like perception is everything. Just that our contracted officers within the month of January did write 56 traffic citations. And then just another note, I don't know if we need to make a motion or anything, but to have Phil Nance represent the fire policy manual, because I think that was supposed to have been back by now. And that's all I have.
Okay. Ms. Hirschberger?
I wanted to address some of the questions. As far as my office, I do allow residents to come back if they want to talk to me. I chose not to have an office. I'm out in the public, so I don't have somewhere private to talk to them, so I do use that conference room. It's the only place I have that's private if somebody wants to talk to me. I asked Angie, I wasn't there, so I can't say that I saw the resident, but I asked Angie about it, and she said no, they were going over FOIAs. She was not in any of my files. My staff knows better than to let any resident through my files. They're locked anyway most of the day. So she assured me no one went through our files. She was just talking to her because there was nowhere else private. I would prefer not to use my other two rooms because there are things in there that are private that I don't want in there, so that's why we use that conference room. But I have used it for other residents. She's not the only other one that's come back. Other residents have asked to talk to me. I've used that conference room. I've talked to them. As far as, I know the equipment you're speaking of, I don't think we have that purchased yet, but I know exactly what you were talking about. And that is something that the communication media, we're going over other equipment that we talked about purchasing, and that is something that we want to bring back because we do want to be able to have something to put out there so people see what we're looking at and they can see it too. Other than that, I wanted to let everybody know that I will be gone next week. It's my last year. I will be graduating from the clerk's classes. It's been 3 years now. So I will be gone all week there, and you can email me, you can text me. I won't be able to take phone calls, and I won't be able to look at the emails or the text messages unless I'm on break or after class. And the classes run from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., so don't expect anything back from me till then. And then I just want to thank everybody for their thoughts and prayers for my father who's in the hospital. Thank you.
I want to just wish my wife a happy birthday. She's an amazing lady that puts up with a lot with me with this position, so I want to thank her for that.
Yes, she does.
She does. She does, so. A quick few things. Had another great meeting with the Pillar team. We met at the Port of Monroe a couple days ago. What a neat place. They're doing a lot of great things. There are a lot of real opportunities for the county to capitalize on in the future. Had our first EDC meeting. We had almost a full board show up. Really excited people to look to doing some really good things with our properties, getting a lot of that moving. So it was a really good meeting, positive. They're meeting tomorrow if anybody's interested in coming at 3 o'clock. Did a phone conference today with the county streamlining committee for the whole county as a whole. And then we're continuing to meet with our planning department and some of our builders and different people that are having issues with plans. We're going to continue to figure out what are the holdups and really try to see if we can streamline that more than what it is already. I want to let you guys know there's a potential company that is looking to leave the industrial park. I'm working very closely with them. I'm talking to homeowners in that area about opportunities because they are looking for property. That's a problem we have. We are out of industrial space, so we need to get active on that and really put a plan in place for the future if we want to be able to capture more industrial businesses. So I actually had a meeting with one of the homeowners that owns that property next to Sunrise and across the street. So I mean that's set up for it. We need to continue hammering that, but I am working very close with the company to keep them in Bedford. They're not going to leave without a fight. So other than that, but TC, I do appreciate it. We do look at a lot of the little contracts very closely, from rug cleaning to maintaining our vehicles. We were paying $85 an hour when I got here. We pay $65 an hour now plus 30% off parts, and it's done local. Everything we do here for the most part is local, and we are constantly trying to get the best bang for our buck. I run the place like my house and will continue to. So other than that, we stand adjourned unless anybody has any thoughts or questions.